Chapter 1. Souls actually exist after death? Ling Lan was dead. The moment she found herself hovering in the air looking down at the scene below her, she knew she was dead. She found that she could see through solid walls. She saw her parents crying outside the intensive care unit and the solemn expression on her younger brother's face. She also watched as he released a quiet sigh when no one was looking, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Ling Lan was not angered by this. She knew very well that she had been a burden upon her family for a whole 24 years, almost ruining their household, which was not very wealthy to begin with. If it were not for the fact that her disease was so bizarre that it was considered worthy of research, resulting in government support for her medication, she might have already passed away a full 10 years earlier due to the inability to afford treatment. However, despite the delay, she still could not escape death in the end. The only surprise to her was that humans really did have souls. She peered up into the distant darkness of the night sky, and wondered fantastically, perhaps there were beings such as Oxhead and Horseface one out in the world, or perhaps a Shinigami, like in the anime Bleach, who would suddenly spring out and drag her into the afterworld. Abruptly, she laughed, mocking herself for reading all kinds of useless books and comics while she had been bedridden. Shinigami were from Japan. Why would they show up in China? Oxhead and Horseface were much more likely to appear, and perhaps even a small ghost dressed in traditional clothing. Idiot. There are no such things as human souls. This is your spiritual self. If you don't come back soon, you will really disperse into the air and become part of this world's energy. A childish voice rang out beside Ling Lan's ear, its tone frantic and concerned. Before Ling Lan could respond, she felt herself drawn back by an overwhelming pull, and her consciousness started to fade. Right before she blacked out, she seemed to hear that same childish voice cry out joyfully, "I made it. I almost thought that my host would be lost for sure." At that very moment, the National First-Rate Military Hospital Ling Lan was in was plunged into darkness. Soon after, the entire capital along with several neighboring provinces and cities also joined it in the dark. The impossible occurrence of such a wide-scale simultaneous blackout affecting the capital and several other province cities immediately prompted a commotion in the otherwise quiet night. Fortunately, the blackout did not last long, only lasting for 3 minutes. All the cities quickly returned to normal, leaving only the National Power Company in disarray. Within those 3 minutes, the electricity they had supplied to those involved cities had mysteriously disappeared, as if the power company had not provided any electricity to begin with. But in reality, as proven by their numerical data, they had released more than 1 trillion kilowatts in those 3 minutes, a greater amount than they ever had before. This matter was quickly handed over to the National Security Agency to investigate. After several months, the answer given to the public was that the computer systems used by the power company to track the electric supply had been broken into by hackers, who had then tampered with the data and stopped the power supply, resulting in the mass blackout. And just like that, the public outcry over the blackout drew to a close. However, the investigation results that were finally sealed into the nation's top-secret security files were as follows. Unexplainable phenomenon. The power disappeared into thin air, just as if it were an act of God. Star calendar year 4731. At the spaceport of Planet Anta, all the warriors headed for the front lines were lined up to enter the regular battleships. Meanwhile, in front of the commanding mothership of the top-ranked official, a pair of lovers faced each other among the crowds of people saying goodbye, speaking in soft tones with their hands clasped. "Ling Zhao, you must come back alive," pleaded Lan Luofeng with teary eyes. Ling Zhao nodded. He had not expected that he would have to rush into battle after being married for only 2 months, but the enemy was relentless and their nation wasn't faring very well, leaving him no choice but to take action. "I leave the household in your hands." Ling Zhao felt sorry for his newly wedded wife due to his imminent departure. Once he left, all the messy bothersome issues in the family would fall upon this delicate woman before him. Could she hold off those greedy people? In his heart, he wasn't at all certain. With red-rimmed eyes, but a firm voice, Lan Luofeng said, "Don't worry, Ling Zhao, I will take good care of our household. She placed Ling Zhao's hand on her abdomen, and said shyly, in another 8 months or so, you are going to be a father. We have a child. That's great. Blindsided by the happy news, Ling Zhao embraced his wife and twirled her around in circles, joyous laughter spilling from his mouth. Lan Luofeng held on to Ling Zhao anxiously but did nothing to stop his celebratory actions. After a long while, Ling Zhao finally put Lan Luofeng down and hugged her close, saying, Luofeng, thank you. What are you saying? I am your wife, and this ... is also a child I anticipate. Lan Luofeng smiled gently with her hand pressed against her abdomen, the joy in her heart overflowing. I wanted to ask, what shall we name the child? At her words, Ling Zhao started to consider it seriously. Looking at the mirrored joy on his wife's face, a spark of inspiration flared. I have decided. Whether it is a boy or a girl, our child shall be called Ling Lan. The child is both yours and mine, and is worthy to bear both our surnames. Lan Luofeng was also an only child, so perhaps this name would give his wife some happiness. Sure enough, Lan Luofeng was overjoyed, nodding vigorously. Yes, let's do as you say. The tears in her eyes could no longer be held back, and Ling Zhao could do nothing but frantically help her wipe them away. At this time, the platform announced the call for final boarding. Lan Luofeng hurriedly composed herself, wiped away the rest of her tears, and said with a smile, Ling Zhao, you must fulfill your promise to me. Ling Lan and I will wait for your return together. Ling Zhao nodded gravely. I always fulfill my promises. With anticipation for his child in his heart, Ling Zhao left, boarding the commanding mothership under Lan Luofeng's steery gaze. Very quickly, the commanding mothership closed its doors and started up, and under the guidance of air control, it disengaged from the navigation frame of the port, slowly rose into the air, and pulled away from the Star of Anda, leading innumerable battleships into deep space. Meanwhile, unnoticed by the people focused on the departure of the airships, a massive amount of energy was generated by the simultaneous powering up of the countless airships, causing this patch of space to waver and even fold in on itself in some places. An almost microscopic particle suddenly appeared out of thin air and rushed towards the Star of Anta at the speed of light. Still mired in sadness, Lan Luofeng suddenly felt her abdomen grow hot and cold and couldn't help but scream out in shock, her hands drifting instinctively to cover her belly. This drew the concern of the Chamberlain Ling Qin, who until now had been quietly standing watch like wallpaper in the background. Young mistress, are you alright? Lan Luofeng closed her eyes and carefully took stock of herself. Finding nothing wrong, she finally relaxed, and replied, Uncle Qin, I'm fine. I think I was just a little too emotional. At that, Ling Qin breathed out a sigh of relief. Young mistress, since the young master has already left Anta, I think we should go home now. It's too chaotic here. I'm afraid it may be harmful to your health. Lan Luofeng was not a stubborn person, and she felt that Ling Qin's concerns had merit, so she nodded and said, lead the way, Uncle Qin. In short order, the two of them were seated in a hover car, speeding away from the spaceport towards home. Chapter 2. Young Master Ling Lan is born. Ling Lan once again regained consciousness, but this time there seemed to be something wrong with her eyes, so she could only rely on her sense of feeling. It felt as if she was contained in a sealed vat of warm water, surrounded by liquid on all sides. At times, the vat seemed to be moved by someone, and she would be bumped around. Could it be that she didn't die? Had she been placed into a nutrient solution by the hospital to take care of her body? Before she could figure things out, her consciousness faded, and she was enveloped by darkness once again. After an indeterminate amount of time, she woke up again, still within the warm liquid, and this time she was aware for a little longer than before. This time, she could hear some sounds, although they sounded muffled as if coming from several walls away, so she could not make anything out clearly. She really wanted to know what was happening to her, but being unable to move, she could only work on trying to decipher the sounds. Before she could make any progress, however, She lost consciousness again. Damn it. Couldn't she just have a little more time? As Ling Lan lost awareness, she couldn't help but make this brief protest. As if Ling Lan's protest was heard, the time Ling Lan spent awake grew longer and longer, until one day, she found that she could move. After being trapped for so long, she naturally swung her fists and kicked out with all her might, but after only a few movements, she was entirely tired out and even felt sleepy again. This would not do. She could not keep being weak like this, or else how would she endure the inhuman pain when it came? Speaking of which, she hadn't felt pain in a long time. Could it be that the pain only came while she was unconscious? Ling Lan suddenly felt that being unconscious could also be a good thing. However, Ling Lan was not a girl who liked to avoid her troubles, or else she would not have been able to live every day with excruciating pain for 24 years. She rallied her spirits and began to practice the set of health-bolstering qi cultivation exercises taught to her by an old Chinese doctor who had treated her when she had first entered the military hospital. Even though she still had not felt any qi form after over 10 years of practice, the pain in her body would lessen greatly after each session and become easier to endure. While this may well have been due to self-delusion, or some sort of placebo effect, it had nevertheless provided her with motivation to continue practicing the exercises. She lost consciousness as she practiced, and when she awoke once again, an unknown period of time had passed. She moved her limbs and shifted around for a bit before stopping to get a sense of her own condition and was immediately dumbfounded. She could actually sense something which she had never felt before. Something like qi. It was unreal, like something out of fantasy. Could it be that she was a talent blessed by the heavens, and her fake death had caused two of her extraordinary meridians, Ren and Du, to open up, turning her into a martial arts master? Ling Lan could not understand why she succeeded this time when hard training for over 10 years had had no effect. Still, being able to sense qi was a good thing. The old Chinese doctor had said that if she could achieve a sense of qi, her illness would have the possibility of being healed. For 24 years she had wished for her illness to be cured so that she would no longer have to live every day in almost unbearable pain, feeling as if her entire body was being crushed. Ling Lan was ecstatic, and her enthusiasm for practice grew. She began practicing during her every waking moment, and this continued until she achieved a meditative state. Until now, she still had no clue that she had become a fetus, and that what had happened in her past life was no longer any of her concern, and that her worries were for naught. Lan Luofeng caressed her abdomen with a face full of worry. She was already 5 months into her pregnancy, but she had not felt any recent fetal movement from her baby. If it weren't for the fact that all the medical exams showed that her child was developing normally, she would surely have had a mental breakdown. Truthfully, she could take no more bad news. A month after her husband Ling Zhao had left for battle, news had come saying that there had been an accident when the fleet he was leading had entered a death tunnel to outflank the enemy camp, and that headquarters had lost all contact with his fleet. Later on, it was confirmed that the fleet had run into some energy disturbance in the depths of the Dead Star meteorite zone while passing through the death tunnel, and the entire fleet had been consumed by this devastating energy. There were no survivors. Every single member was lost, and no remains could be found. Before she could even fully absorb this terrible news, something even more distasteful had happened. A branch family member and generations apart from Ling Zhao had stepped up to inherit the honors and privileges gained by Ling Zhao's sacrifice. He had even had the gall to imply that he was doing her a great favor and would take care of her for the rest of her life. Lan Luofeng had thrown that disgusting man out immediately, but those horrid people had been unwilling to give up. They had brought a representative over from the federal government to discuss the matter. Lan Luofeng was not a weak person. She knew that crying would only result in Ling Zhao's sacrifice being taken advantage of by these despicable people. With no other choice, she made a prompt decision. In front of those hateful and despicable people, she proclaimed that Ling Zhao had a son who was currently in her belly, and that only his son had the right to inherit all of Ling Zhao's accolades. Bias actually existed in the Federation's inheritance law with regards to military benefits. Only male family members were allowed to inherit. This was why Lan Luofeng did not reveal she had a child from the beginning. Both she and the Chamberlain Lincoln knew that the child in her belly was a girl, but under these circumstances, she could not retreat. Lincoln was in agreement and fully supported her decision. They had already thought it through. The moment Ling Lan was born, they would arrange for another baby girl to be raised alongside Ling Lan to be her loyal guard, who would also marry Ling Lan publicly once they were adults. They would also think of a way to manage Ling Lan's other identity so that she would be able to appear in public as a girl as well. Of course, all this still required more detailed thought and consideration. Still, Lan Luofeng believed that by the time Ling Lan grew up she would definitely have been able to come up with a solution that would give Ling Lan the best of both worlds. Lan Luofeng had only one unwavering thought, and that was that all of Ling Zhao and her possessions could only belong to Ling Lan. All those other bastards who crawled out from God knows where would not be allowed to take advantage of Ling Lan. She would not allow it, never, no matter the cost. Of course, another reason for Lan Luofeng's confidence was the unwavering loyalty of the main household vassals of Ling Zhao. They closed ranks around the Ling family home and kept a close watch, leaving those greedy outsiders no chance to harm their young master. Furthermore, the Ling family also had their own personal hospital, which made it even more convenient for Lan Luofeng to hide the secret of Ling Lan's gender. Just like that, under this strict guard, the time for Lan Luofeng to give birth finally arrived. Naturally, the chosen place of birth was their personal hospital. No mistakes could be made at this final juncture. The doctors and nurses responsible for Lan Luofeng's delivery were family loyalists specially arranged by the Ling family. They would never ever expose this secret. Ling Lan was still practicing when cry after piercing cry disturbed her meditation, causing her to be very annoyed. At the same time, she could hear the sound of water flowing, and then her body was being repelled by some unknown force, and she was sliding downwards headfirst. In shock, she immediately spread open her legs to hold her position, stopping her body from sliding down any further. God damn it, why doesn't this child come out? The amniotic fluid has almost run dry. The delivering doctor and nurses were sweating buckets. Everything looked like it was going well, but the child just did not want to come out. It was looking more and more like a case of obstructed labor. If that was the case, then they would have to do a cesarean section. Under those circumstances, their little Mrs. Secret could not be guaranteed since too many people would have to be involved, highly increasing the likelihood of the secret being leaked. Lan Luofeng gritted her teeth and petted her distended belly, saying, "Dear, stop tormenting Mummy. Come out quickly to meet me. Even if you are angry at Mummy for making you live an abnormal life, you still need to come out to yell at me, right? Alright." Lan Luofeng's IQ had dropped into the negatives due to the pain, so what she said should not be taken seriously. Which mother wants her child to yell at herself? But Lan Luofeng's words were heard by Ling Lan, and combined with what she just felt, along with her condition a while back, Ling Lan abruptly realized she had become a fetus. No wonder she had been unable to move for such a long time. However, didn't she die? Was she reincarnated? Why didn't she drink Mengpo soup? Were the memories of her past life too deeply ingrained? The gentle and mellifluous voice of her current mother proved that this was not her mother from her past life, so that ruled out the possibility of rebirth. Oh geez. You still have the spare time to think about reincarnation and rebirth? Your mother is about to suffer from obstructed labor because of you. Draw back your legs now. A childish voice rang out in her mind in a panicked tone, reminding her of what she was supposed to do right now. Ling Lan listened and drew back her legs. Then she heard a soul-wrenching scream, and a surge of energy pushed her body out. Instantly, she could sense the presence of light. Before she could do anything, she felt fingers digging into her mouth, making her feel like puking. She couldn't help but open her mouth to protest, and then she heard her own screeching calls. That's right, calls. Ling Lan would never admit that those were wails. That would be too embarrassing. Mistress, the young miss is healthy. The Ling family doctor finally gave a sigh of relief. With both mother and child safe, Their duty was done. All smiles, she brought the now stubbornly silent Ling Lan over to Lan Luofeng's side. Lan Luofeng opened her tired eyes and caressed her child lovingly. Then her expression tightened. Resolutely, she said, "Tell Uncle Qin both young Master Ling Lan and I are fine." "Yes, mistress." The doctor stifled his smile and donned a similarly serious expression. "The birth of the young miss, no. The young master did not mean the end of the matter." To fully protect the privileges left behind by Major General Ling Zhao, there were still many hard battles to be fought. Chapter 3, Assessment of the Newborn. Properly cleaned up, Lan Luofeng and Ling Lan were moved to a deluxe hospital room where Lincoln had already set up a specialized instrument used to assess the various body stats and potential of infants. "Mistress, allow me to examine the young master's condition." In truth, Lincoln was a little disappointed that the child was a girl. Even if Major General Ling Zhao's premium military benefits were successfully inherited by the young miss, the Ling family would have no chance within this generation to obtain the strongest ultimate weapon which represented the Federation, just like the one Major General Ling Zhao had, the Enmeca. The Federation's law allowing only male relatives to inherit military honors and benefits, though seemingly biased, did in fact have some basis. Among all the functioning Enmechas, there was not a single one with a female operator. The requirements to be an Enmecha operator were extremely high. Not only did you need to have immense spiritual power, you also needed a strong and sturdy body. This was because the Enmechas were operated by a combination of willpower and body movement, which worked together to realize many extremely dangerous and complicated attacks and combat techniques. Depending on the power behind these movements, a fraction of the energy was reflected back to the operator. Without a strong body, an operator could be injured just by executing a single basic move. The natural physical difference between men and women may not be noticeable with regular mecha, but it was glaringly obvious when it came to Enmecha. There wasn't a single woman who could withstand that sort of recoil, even if she had trained up a muscular body. With regards to operating the Enmecha, the natural physical gap between the genders could not be eliminated by hard work. Then let's talk about those inherited military benefits. Those benefits actually referred to valuable resources being cultivated by the nation. The nation would invest vast amounts of money and manpower to nurture the designated inheritors of those military benefits. The grand goal was that these carefully cultivated candidates would be able to operate an Enmecha someday and become an ultimate weapon in service of the country. Therefore, women, who could not operate Enmecha, had been directly cast aside by the Federation. As those politicians would say, they could not waste taxpayers' money, right? And so this outright biased law which discriminated against women was officially ratified without facing any opposition from the general public. Naturally, the present Ling Lan knew nothing of this. Right after her first 2 grand cries at her birth, she had jumped straight into training, because at the very moment she had entered the world, she had found that her sense of chi had heightened even further, giving her an almost roiling sensation. Even if she had no idea what was happening, she instinctively knew that this was a golden opportunity that should not be missed, and so immediately entered a meditative state without regard to where she was. Of course, Ling Lan was only so bold because she was an infant. Besides sleeping and eating and sleeping, she basically had nothing else to do. Even if she entered a training trance, outside observers would just assume she was sleeping, and would not be particularly worried. More importantly, from the words she had heard her mother speak at her birth, she knew that her mother in this life would make sure she was well protected, which gave her the reassurance to just let go and focus on training. Lan Luofeng carefully passed Ling Lan over into Lincoln's arms and watched as Lincoln slowly placed Ling Lan into a transparent elliptical compartment. The moment Lincoln withdrew his arms, the transparent compartment sealed itself and beams of alternating green and red light swept across Ling Lan's body. Suddenly, the transparent compartment emitted a piercing warning whistle. "What's going on?" Lan Luofeng sat up hurriedly in her bed. Her face, which was already pale due to her recent delivery, turned even paler in her fright and worry over her child. Lincoln was just as taken aback by this unexpected warning whistle. However, before Lincoln could rush over to check, the warning whistle went silent, and the assessment resumed as normal. Everyone was still alarmed and uncertain, but they did not dare to stop the assessment of Ling Lan and so continued to wait patiently. Ling Lan was utterly oblivious to all of this. At that moment a childish voice in her mind was crowing gleefully, "Luckily I have quick reflexes, or else my host's secret would have been revealed. When I greet the host later, I must get her to praise me well. Hee hee." Finally, the assessment device started to report its findings. Assessment data: physical fitness, S. Rank. Spiritual power, Tier 2. Potential, S. Rank. Assessment overview: excellent. Focused cultivation recommended. Lincoln was astounded by these results. In disbelief, he rushed over to take a closer look at the copy of the results printed out by the machine. The results were clearly printed out in black and white, proving that he had not misheard. S. Rank physical fitness was rare even among male infants, appearing at a rate of 1 or 2 in 1,000. Of course this wasn't the most extreme case, for Ling Lan's father, Ling Zhao, had been a gifted genius born with a physical fitness of SS rank, which occurred at a rate of 1 in several 10,000. Lincoln suspected that Ling Lan's good physical fitness must have been inherited from her father. Even more surprising, Ling Lan possessed natural Tier 2 spiritual power. This meant that Ling Lan would have a natural advantage in mental training, a situation which only occurred at a rate of 1 in several 10,000 individuals. Deeply moved, Lincoln shivered. Even Ling Lan's father, the Major General Ling Zhao, had only possessed Tier 1 spiritual power at birth. S. Rank potential: the same basic assessment as Major General Ling Zhao. Major General Ling Zhao was the operator of an inch mecha. Does that mean that their young Miss Ling Lan might also be able to operate an in mecha? An in mecha operator. Lincoln's shivers intensified at the thought, and he almost burst into tears. Could it be that the Ling family would produce the first female in mecha operator? If that happened, it would truly be a slap in the face to all those Federalists. Although Lan Luofen was also shocked by the results of Ling Lan's assessment, she was at heart a mother, and her first thought was how she could protect her child. Solemnly, she said, "Uncle Qin, Ling Lan's assessment results must be sealed." If Ling Lan's assessment were to be made public, the nation would certainly suggest taking her in for intensive cultivation. If Ling Lan were a boy, Lan Luofen would have been fine with that. However, Ling Lan was a girl, and Lan Luofen would not see her daughter suffer that life. Also, if the nation were to decide to send over specialized trainers instead, the secret of Ling Lan's gender would also be easily exposed. Thus, Lan Luofen was determined that Ling Lan's assessment be sealed. Actually, even before Ling Lan was born, Lan Luofen had already decided that she would let Ling Lan live as she pleased. She did not really want Ling Lan to follow in her father's footsteps and become part of the military. Lan Luofen knew very well that as long as Ling Lan did not commit any major crime such as treason, she would be able to live off of the premium military benefits earned by Ling Zhao's sacrifice the way she wanted without worry. Even if Ling Lan wanted to live like a rich wastrel, Lan Luofen would not object. Lan Luofen looked upon Ling Lan in the device with loving yet remorseful eyes and thought, "Sorry, baby Ling Lan, for making you live an abnormal life. It's because you are Ling Zhao's daughter, and I will not permit anyone other than you to enjoy the privileges your father's sacrifice have gained. But you are also my daughter, and I love you, so I selfishly do not wish for you to bear the burdens of the Ling family. In the future, I won't go out of my way to raise you in any specific way. You will be free to choose whichever path you'd like. Even if you end up being a wastrel, Mummy will always support you." It must be admitted that Lan Luofen had the makings of an irrationally protective mother. If Ling Lan were to wish for the destruction of the Ling family in the future, Lan Luofen may even help draw up the plans with full enthusiasm. Chapter 4: The Childish Voice in the Mind. Ling Lan was putting a lot of effort into training this time around. Her whole body felt so comfortable, as if it were soaking in a hot spring. making her unwilling to end her training session. Unfortunately, some unidentified creature would not leave her alone and kept nattering on and on by her ear. She suddenly realized something she could never figure out before: the deeper meaning behind the Monkey King Wukong's words in the grand epic Journey to the West. It's as if there's a fly buzzing about every day. Sorry, not just one, but a swarm of flies around you, buzzing. It really makes you want to scream for help. Right now, she wished that she could do as Wukong did and grab hold of the fly, squeeze it until its insides burst out, and then use its own intestines to strangle it. Until its entire tongue stuck out. And then she would flip her hand and dump it on the floor. Phew dash. And the whole world would be peaceful again. Of course, Ling Lan could only fantasize about this because this fly was living in her head, so there was no way for her to bring it to justice. Finally, Ling Lan could not take it anymore and was forced to end her session and wake up. Furious, she yelled at it internally, "Damn it, who the hell are you?" As if frightened by her forceful roar, the childish voice only responded after a long while. Wearily, it said, "Mecha Learning Device number 444,444,444 from the Mechanical Kingdom of the Mandora Star System, also your contracted long-term companion." Ling Lan was stunned. Could it be that every child in this world she was reincarnated into was equipped with a similar learning device? It looked like the technology of this world was very impressive. She wondered if there was a huge difference compared to her original world. As if sensing Ling Lan's question, the childish voice rang out in her mind once again, its tone dismissive. "How could this world have such a progressive learning device such as myself? Also, you may have forgotten, but it was I who put you back in one piece when your spiritual self almost dispersed after your physical body died." Ling Lan abruptly remembered the voice she had heard when she had died in her past life. Her expression changed dramatically. What in the world happened? The childlike voice replied, "Your previous body could not support your powerful spiritual power, and so thoroughly collapsed. Luckily for you, a once-in-a-blue-moon wormhole happened to open up right then. I managed to gather your diffusing spiritual energy at the final moment and took the opportunity to absorb some local energy to carry your spiritual self through the wormhole to this advanced world 10,000 years in the future." How does that work? Ling Lan was very curious. What did this have to do with her luck? The childlike voice sniffed. "If we had remained in your original world, even if I had taken your spiritual self and let you be reborn there, you would still have died in the end. The weak physical bodies of the babies there would never have been able to support your immense spiritual self." As if sensing that it hadn't explained clearly enough, the childlike voice added, "Even an adult's body wouldn't have worked. The result would have been a replica of your previous body." Ling Lan shuddered. She did not want to experience that pain of all her organs failing and breaking apart, then healing only to break apart again, ever again. At that thought, Ling Lan asked worriedly, "And there's no worry of that now?" The childlike voice sounded pleased with itself as it responded, "That's right. 10,000 years later, spiritual power has been successfully uncovered and developed. Now, the bodies of babies are strong even in their mother's wombs, and some may even be able to withstand Tier 3 or Tier 4 spiritual power from birth. So long as you take a little care, you won't die." Hearing this, Ling Lan relaxed. Being able to live on was all she was asking for. However, what the childlike voice said next made Ling Lan's heart leap into her throat once again. "That being said, I still have to help you restrain your spiritual power, or else your current body will still be unable to take it." "Then, will there be any danger?" The learning device sounded so young. Was it really reliable? Ling Lan couldn't help but worry. "I can only guarantee you 2 years without worry. If you don't work hard to increase your body's resilience within this time frame, you will still end up dead as a doornail." The childlike voice revealed hints of schadenfreude, causing Ling Lan to feel threatened and angry at the same time. Since they had already traversed through time and space, couldn't this fellow have chosen a better world that would have eliminated this problem completely? The childish voice sounded put out at her thoughts. "No one knows where a wormhole will lead to. I already said that you were lucky. If we had arrived at a world worse than your own, you'd already be dead as a doornail." Ling Lan felt a little sheepish after hearing this. She was only alive because of this fellow after all. She really shouldn't repay its kindness with ingratitude. Wait a minute. Ling Lan recalled that even though she had been physically weak before the age of 3, constantly sick and bedridden, her body had still been far from breaking down. It was only after age 3 that her body's condition suddenly deteriorated drastically. Could it be that dash? Ling Lan's expression grew cold. "Is there anything else you haven't told me?" The childlike voice sensed that the truth it wanted to hide had been discovered by its host, and so helplessly decided to confess. "I'm also not sure. I just know that when I woke up, I was already contracted to you. I have tested your spiritual power before. In your world, your spiritual power was much, much higher than the average person's, registering at tier 2. Perhaps that is why I was able to be bound to you. Of course, my awakening caused your spiritual power to directly jump up a level, and the bodies of your world then were incapable of sustaining tier 3 spiritual power." At long last Ling Lan had found the true culprit behind her death. Her emotions were jumbled and she had no idea how she was supposed to react. Seeing this, the childlike voice panicked, saying sadly, "I didn't do it on purpose. I'm not sure myself how we met. I thought I could only exist within the Mandora star system." Even now, it still had no clue how it had gotten to that primitive planet. Ling Lan was a person who could not abide tears. She could not bear to see anyone cry, not even herself. The cause lay with her illness, though they tried to hide it. Her parents had pretty much been in tears every day, she had noticed, but had no way of consoling them, and she hated that sense of helplessness. Thus, crying is forbidden became one of Ling Lan's life principles, one which she carried with her to this world as well. "All right, stop it. I'm not blaming you. All I can say is that this was all fate." Ling Lan gave up, deciding to let bygones be bygones. Although this self-titled mecha learning device had cost her her life in the past world, it had also given her another life, making them even. Besides that, her parents in her past life would still have her younger brother to take care of them in their old age. Without the burden of caring for her, their lives should be much easier and also much happier. Considering this, Ling Lan decided to let things go. Perhaps the suffering she endured in her previous life had given her peerless inner strength. Very quickly, Ling Lan had thrown off the fetters of her past life, and her heart felt all the lighter for it. Now that her doubts and worries had been addressed, she soon remembered that she had been pestered to wakefulness by this learning device. What did it want? It was hard to imagine that they had chattered on for almost half a day without even touching on the matter. Ling Lan's sweat dropped. Could it be that her concentration and thought processes had been weakened since she had become a baby again? Putting that thought aside for now, Ling Lan asked, "So, what did you wake me up for exactly?" Chapter 5. Luckily still a girl. The learning device was just rejoicing over the fact that Ling Lan did not blame it when it registered Ling Lan's question. Its joy disappeared, and it explained hurriedly, "You've been asleep for 2 days and 2 nights for no apparent reason. Your mother has been crying so much that she hasn't been able to keep any food down due to worry. They've decided that if you still haven't woken up by tomorrow, they'll send you to the hospital. From what I could gather, admitting you to a hospital will cause them a lot of trouble. I felt that something wasn't right about the situation, so I rushed to wake you up." A jolt ran through Ling Lan. She could not be admitted. Who knew if the technology here would be able to sense this fellow hiding within her mind? If it were discovered, she would most certainly end up as a lab rat. She must make sure this didn't happen. For her own safety and personal freedom, Ling Lan decided not to fight it any longer. She allowed her throat to open up and started bawling, signaling to the people watching over her that she was awake. Frankly, Ling Lan had only intended to make a little noise, maybe a gurgle or a soft whine, but the sound that poured out of her throat was alarmingly loud. The childish voice almost shut down in fear. Hesitantly, it asked, "Was it necessary to cry so tragically?" Taken aback herself by the volume and emotion in her own cry, Ling Lan responded sheepishly, "Can't help it. My body's starving." Losing to her own body's needs, Ling Lan felt that all hope was lost. There went her angelic baby image. Truth be told, she had really wanted to be an angelic baby, well-behaved and adorable, becoming the apple of her new parents' eyes. But it looks like that plan had gone up in smoke, because no matter how you look, a baby who would cry in such a frightening manner couldn't be described as angelic in any way. Ling Lan's energetic cries woke the person resting right beside her. Lan Luofeng sprang up and pulled her daughter into her arms, looking her over with joyful, yet shocked and fearful, eyes. Her daughter had finally woken up, but she was crying so piteously. Could there be something wrong with her? The doctor on call rushed over from the room next door. After a detailed examination, it was determined that Ling Lan was just really hungry. Lan Luofeng looked down at Ling Lan suckling at her breast and felt her heart slowly settle back into her chest. After drinking her fill, flushed with wine, milk, Ling Lan finally had the strength to take a good look at the world around her for the first time. She was in a large bedroom, so large that Ling Lan could not see the entirety of the bedroom just by turning her small head around. The furnishings of the room were light and tasteful, no bold or garish colors were present. One of the first things Ling Lan noticed was that the bed she and her mom was lying on seemed very wide. Putting aside the space they had claimed, there was still more than enough space for her to roll around several times, that is, of course, if she could roll. There were no bedside cabinets installed at the head of the bed, as was the fashion in her previous world. Instead, there were several metallic-looking objects near the corners of the room. The design of the objects was rather strange, giving Ling Lan the impression of robots. Within Ling Lan's range of sight, she could see no wardrobes or any other furniture of the like, that is to say, there was no other furniture she could see besides the bed. Ling Lan did not think much of this. This is 10,000 years later after all, who knows how the world has developed. As long as she continued to live, she would surely find all the answers she needed. There was no hurry at all. There was another person in the room, an elderly lady, who stood watch beside her mother. Ling Lan glanced at her curiously and found that she had a kind but serious face, and seemed to be very attentive to her mother's needs. She was probably not an elder in the family, but rather a long-time servant of the household. Seeing this, Ling Lan was glad. This meant that the family she had been born into was rather well off, so she wouldn't have to worry much about daily living. In her previous world, she had had to bear so much frustration and hardship due to the lack of money caused by her illness. She was glad that she could avoid all that in this world. At this point, Ling Lan was still blissfully unaware that being the child of a well-off family could sometimes bring about even greater frustration and hardship. Of course, that is a story for another time, so we shall not talk about it for now. After finishing her observation of her surroundings, Ling Lan turned her gaze upon her mother lying beside her, who had a soft smile on her face as she held Ling Lan's tiny hand. Her mother was a great beauty, even as a female. Ling Lan was enthralled just staring at her. Ling Lan was very pleased by this. No one wants to be plain after all. Her mother's beauty meant that she would also grow up to be beautiful. Even if she didn't end up a great beauty like her mother, she would still be attractive enough to turn heads. Right then, a middle-aged man, roughly between the ages of 40 and 50, walked over to the bed. It was the Chamberlain Lin Qin. He stood respectfully by the bed as he addressed Lan Luofeng. "Mistress, everything has been handled with both the government and the military. In a month, the Federation will officially dispense young Master Ling Lan's right to inherit." Lin Qin's tone was solemn. If it were at all possible, he would rather see his master, the mainstay of the family, alive to guard the mistress and the young miss, not this, where the young miss would be forced to lead an abnormal life. Young Master Ling Lan? Ling Lan heard her name, and her spirits perked up in response. So this world had a boy who shared her name? Speaking of which, she still didn't know what her current name was. After hearing what Lin Qin had to say, Lan Luofeng's eyes turned red, and crystalline tears fell. Ling Zhao would definitely be happy about this. Lan Luofeng's reaction sent the old servant beside her into a fluster, and she only managed to calm Lan Luofeng down after some difficulty. Lan Luofeng wiped away her tears. She knew she had to control her sadness. She could not let herself fall. All that remained of Ling Zhao and her baby Ling Lan needed her protection. Even if Ling Lan were to successfully inherit everything of Ling Zhao's, there were still many dangers lying in wait for her as she grew up. Lan Luofeng knew she could not let down her guard. Lan Luofeng bent over to kiss Ling Lan on the cheek. Ling Lan, my child, Mummy is sorry. From now on, you are the young master of the Ling family. You can only be the young master of the Ling family. The guilt Lan Luofeng felt for forcing this upon her daughter was undeniable. However, the determination in her eyes was also immovable. Lan Luofeng's words sent Ling Lan into a tailspin. Young Master Ling Lan, me? FCK. I was reincarnated into this world as a boy? No. I must have heard wrong. Perhaps Lan Luofeng had pushed herself to the limit over the last 2 days fretting over Ling Lan, for she fell asleep soon after she finished speaking. Meanwhile, when the old servant turned away to do some other chores, Ling Lan subtly moved a small hand downwards to explore between her legs. It's flat. Ling Lan's heart calmed immediately. Luckily I'm still a girl, she thought. Without that extra appendage down there, she wouldn't have to live the strange life of being neither man nor woman and worry about her mind being a mess. Of course Ling Lan was also very happy that she could still go by the name Ling Lan. She had been called by that name for over 20 years after all. It would have been a little hard to accept if she had to suddenly change her name. However, her happiness did not last long before it was driven away by a wave of anxiety. If the phrase young master had the same meaning as it did in her original world in the past, then she was in some pretty deep trouble. There must be some unavoidable reason why she would have to dress and present herself as a man. The guilt in her mother's eyes was clear. Despite that, her mother still chose this path. This could only mean that the situation was already so bad that Ling Lan had no other choice but to be a man to salvage the situation. Chapter 6. A Shameless Person. Very quickly, a month had gone by, and it was time for the Federation to officially announce the inheritance. During this month, Ling Lan did not do anything besides eat or sleep. Of course, Ling Lan's sleep was actually a training trance. That said, Ling Lan was much smarter about it now. She assigned Little Four the task of waking her up whenever it was time to eat. She had no intention of misjudging her training time again. She did not want to be dragged to the hospital for a checkup after all, and risk exposing her secret and the existence of Little Four only to become a lab rat. Who is Little Four, you ask? Who else could it be but that little fellow who claimed to be a mecha learning device? 2 weeks ago, under its guidance, Ling Lan had managed to pull together a mental network after around 10 days of experimentation. Using it, she had explored her mindscape and managed to find the main body of the learning device deep within it. She had then successfully unlocked the virtual learning space of the device. In the future, it would be much more convenient for her to meet the learning device. She would just have to will it, and her consciousness would be brought into the virtual learning space. Ling Lan still remembered how she had almost spewed blood when she first saw Little Four's virtual body. In truth, Little Four's appearance was very charming. It looked like a little boy of only 3 to 4 years old, with a bright and innocent smile on his face. In the words of modern-day slang, extremely one, Ling Lan couldn't help but find it adorable. The only problem was, the little fellow had been too excited, and had flounced up to her completely naked, butt jiggling, and so tragedy befell poor Little Four. He had been immediately scooped up and spanked soundly, until his white and bouncy little behind had been imprinted with the shape of Ling Lan's palms. Damn it, why did he have to show her his dick? Although his dick was so small that it could almost be ignored. But it was still a dick, wasn't it? How could he do that to a pure and innocent maiden like her? Of course, although the spanking relieved Ling Lan's embarrassed anger, the little boy became angry in turn. In protest, he hid away in the depths of her mind and refused to come out again. At first, Ling Lan did not take it to heart, but when the situation showed no signs of improving after 2 days, Ling Lan gave in. She needed the little fellow to help wake her up after all. Resigned, Ling Lan patiently cajoled the little fellow out and promised to never resort to this sort of domestic violence ever again. Only then did the little boy return to his bouncy happy self. The two started talking a bit more, and when Ling Lan asked how she should address him, the boy's response annoyed Ling Lan once again. This little rascal actually wanted her to call him Master Four. He didn't even have any body hair yet, and he wanted this older sister to call him Master. Even though Ling Lan had promised to never again use domestic violence, she still had other tricks up her sleeve. Under the full force of her illogical, rational, irrational arguments, the little fellow agreed without question to be called Little Four. Victory. Ling Lan was uncharacteristically proud of herself for this. However, when she found out later why Little Four had first wanted her to call him Master Four, she found herself speechless. Little Four explained that it had found that the title Master was extremely popular in books, TV, and the internet back on Earth, and since his designation had so many fours, what else could he be called but Master Four? Ling Lan felt that she had been mistaken. She should never have tried to probe the motivations of a machine. Doing so was an insult to her intelligence. Once Ling Lan had managed to establish a connection with Little Four, she could freely access the virtual learning environment. Besides that, within this month, she had also picked up from the conversations between her mother and the Chamberlain Lincoln that her father of this world had died on the battlefield, which is why she had to inherit her father's military benefits by posing as a man. Ling Lan couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that sexism existed everywhere. Gender equality had been a struggle back on Earth, and now, 10,000 years in the future, when humanity had already expanded beyond the solar system, gender oppression was still thriving. The current Ling Lan had no clue what the military benefits were referring to. Although she could get the eager Little Four to look it up for her, she ultimately decided to take things one step at a time. There was still much she didn't know about this era, and it was probably wiser to take her time growing up to slowly understand the world around her instead of taking a shortcut. Ling Lan was a very patient and tolerant person. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to live over 20 years suffering the inhuman pain of her body breaking down. This tolerance of hers was definitely far above the average person. Initially, she had been worried about the 2-year time limit that Little Four had mentioned. However, after some research, Little Four found that the Qi exercises she had been doing were an extremely effective way to increase physical fitness. According to Little Four's estimations, even if she did nothing else but practice those exercises for just 10 hours every day, she would still be able to easily resolve the danger she would have faced in 2 years' time. And so, now that she knew her life was not on a timer, Ling Lan did not intend to hurry through life. She was still very young and did not want to stand out as a genius. Taking things a step at a time would be the safest and surest way to live. Ling Lan understood very well, after all, that the tree that grows above the tree line gets toppled by the wind, too. Living freely was the most important thing. Soon, it was time for the Federation to hand over the inheritance documents. On that day, Ling Lan could clearly sense the sorrow and distress emanating from her mother. Once the document was handed over, her father Ling Zhao's death would officially be announced to the public, and her mother would no longer be able to avoid the reality of his death. Early that morning, Ling Lan sensed a disturbance in the typically peaceful household. However, since she was in the bedroom, she could not tell what was happening. However, she was soon picked up by a servant and brought downstairs. As they moved down the stairway, Ling Lan could see the glorious lights hanging from the ceiling, their edges brushing the sides of several tall columns. Yep, assessment complete. This was a grand and luxurious hall. Her family was indeed of the upper echelon. Before Ling Lan could observe her fill, she had already been transferred into her mother's arms. Lan Luofeng's somber mood improved considerably as she observed Ling Lan and her curious and roving eyes. Fortunately, Ling Zhao had left her this beautiful baby, giving her the strength to oppose those greedy wretches. She grasped at her daughter's little hand, and calmly announced, "This is Ling Zhao's son Ling Lan. Only he shall inherit all that belongs to Ling Zhao." At that moment, an old but strident voice spoke up, We need to ensure that Major General Ling Zhao's sacrifice is not in vain. We are not denying young Master Ling Lan's right to inherit, but only wish that the Ling family would choose the most outstanding child to inherit Major General Ling Zhao's premium military benefits, so that Major General Ling Zhao's unfinished duties can be taken up by the most suitable candidate. Lan Luofeng turned a sharp gaze towards the old speaker, about 70 years old. He still stood proud and tall. He was the grand elder of the Ling branch family, Ling Suren, and even Ling Zhao had to address him respectfully while he was still alive. He was also the one appointed by the branch family to protest Ling Lan's inheritance of Ling Zhao's possessions. Ling Lan could feel Lan Luofeng's chest trembling as she tried to suppress her anger at Ling Suren's words. Honestly, she had never met such a shameless person. Look at the way he spun words to justify taking away a child's right to inherit from his birth father. If his words were to be believed, what was the point of military men risking their lives to protect their country? When they died, did it mean that it was open season on their unprotected families? Ling Lan pulled at her mother's fingers and gurgled. Darn it, if only she were bigger, she would certainly spit upon that person's body to shame him for his shamelessness. 1. Mo is a Japanese slang loanword that refers to feelings of strong affection mainly towards characters in anime, manga, and video games. Mo, however, has also gained usage to refer to feelings of affection towards any subject. Directly taken from Wikipedia, the usage here is referring to the utter adorableness of little four, which is capable of drawing out strong feelings of affection and fan-squeeing. 2. The meaning of this is similar to the Japanese saying the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Outstanding people become the common enemy. Since there is no real English equivalent I could find besides this Japanese borrowing, I decided to keep it as close to the literal Mandarin saying as possible since I think the meaning still comes across pretty clear. Chapter 7. Burning Bridges. Ling Lan's actions soothed Lan Luofeng's heaving emotions. She knew that there were representatives from the federal government and the military present as well. She would not ruin Ling Lan's inheritance ceremony due to a rash moment of anger. Suppressing her anger, Lan Luofeng asked coldly, "What are your intentions, Uncle Ren?" Ling Suren's eyes narrowed, but he still revealed his plan in the end. Among the children of the Ling family, age 3 and below, let us select the one with the best qualities and potential to inherit. From birth to the age of 3 was the critical period for cultivation and molding. After this time frame, the effects of cultivation would be greatly diminished, and cultivation would only become less and less effective with the passage of time. Lan Luofeng scoffed. Do you really think that any of the Ling family children would be able to hold a candle to Ling Zhao's own child? Let me remind you that Ling Zhao was an in-mecha operator. In the Federation, genetics decided everything. Very rarely did one see cases where a commoner would suddenly show extraordinary talent or physical qualities. The transmission of quality traits had to be gradually nurtured and built up from generation to generation. The Ling family managed to produce Ling Zhao. We can certainly produce another, said Ling Suren, his tone ironclad with certainty. He could speak with such confidence because he already had a child with stats very similar to Ling Zhao within his grasp. This was why he was willing to go so far as to forego civility to obtain Ling Zhao's military benefits. The Ling family must produce another Ling Zhao to maintain their foothold on the planet of Doha. Although the Federation currently touted the ideology of equality on the surface, in truth, there was a distinct social strata working behind the scenes which decided which planet you could live on. The planet of Doha was a premium planet, and was also the capital planet of the Federation. Those who lived on Doha were either high officials with both power and authority, military bigwigs, or those supremely wealthy noble families with long histories and great influence. The Ling family was originally a small family who could only settle on a third-rate planet. However, they had managed to move to Doha due to the efforts of Ling Zhao's father, Ling Suzhen. Ling Suzhen had been an ace pilot, but unfortunately did not manage to become an ultimate weapon of the nation an in-mecha operator. Still, his abilities were such that no one below the level of an inch mecha operator could rival him. On the battlefield, He had managed to cut down many of the top enemy pilots, accumulating many battle honors in his lifetime. In the end, the military had decided to reward his exploits by allowing Ling Suzhen to bring his family to live on Doha, acknowledging his role as a new war hero. To convince Ling Suzhen to bring the entire Ling family to Doha, and not just his own nuclear family, the Ling family head and elders of that time made a vow. The Ling family would view Ling Suzhen as the legitimate heir, and all the resources of the family would be his to command. On top of that, the position of family head would also be inherited by Ling Suzhen's descendants from then on. On his end, Ling Suzhen had felt that he needed his family's support to establish himself on Doha, and so had agreed to move the entire Ling family. This decision of Ling Suzhen's had brought endless trouble to Ling Zhao, and now had even opened the way for the Side family to try and steal Ling Lan's inheritance. If Ling Suzhen only knew how he had invited wolves in with his kind gesture, he might be turning in his grave. After living on Doha and enjoying its benefits for several decades, the Ling family had no intention of going back to how things were before. They knew very well that in 20 years, after focused cultivation from the country, if Ling Zhao's designated inheritor could not meet the minimum requirements set by the country, the Ling family would lose everything they had gained since coming to Doha. They would have to go back to being a middle-class family, perhaps even be reduced to becoming a lower-class family. This would greatly affect the Ling family income, as well as limit the romantic connections and career paths of the younger generations of the Ling family. No, they would not allow it to happen. Ling Suren did not give Lan Luofeng any chance to speak, but instead signaled for a woman who was carrying a 1-year-old child to step forward. He pointed at the child and said, "This is the candidate that the Ling family has chosen. If young Master Lan's body stats exceeds his, then we shall have no objection to young Master Lan inheriting." He turned to glance at the military representative. "I'm sure the military also wishes for the best talent for cultivation, and would not want to blindly take someone in based on blood." The military representative just smiled slightly and said nothing, giving no indication of their stance one way or another. Ling Suren had not expected outright vocal support from the military anyway. All he needed was this sort of ambiguous acceptance. He once again turned to Lan Luofeng, this time with a trace of self-satisfaction in his eyes. Lan Luofeng smiled a small mocking smile. It looked like her decision to seal Ling Lan's assessment results was just another weakness to exploit from the perspective of the Ling family. Fortunately, Chamberlain Lincoln had predicted this move from them and had already made the appropriate arrangements. "You dare to covet Ling Zhao's military privileges?" Lan Luofeng swept her gaze around the room. Among the visitors, there were quite a few bystanders enjoying the show, but there were also some who looked genuinely concerned for her. This trial was not without its benefits. She could finally discern the true colors of some of the people around her. Although Major General Ling Zhao is dead, his orphaned child should not be allowed to be bullied by his own family clan. "I'm sure that the military would have something to say about this." The military representative chose to ignore what Lan Luofeng was implying, saying with a smile, "Madam Ling, please be assured." Putting Major General Ling Zhao's military benefits aside, Ling Lan will not lose out on any benefits accorded to the children of martyrs. The military will not let a hero's child be bullied. Although what the military representative had to say sounded pretty, the connotation was that the military benefits would go to the candidate that best suited the military's purposes. Lan Luofeng glanced at the government official, but he merely smiled without adding a word to the discussion. It seemed like he was content to just observe the proceedings without interfering. "Oh, Ling Zhao, this is the military you dedicated your life to, the country you gave your life to protect. Did you ever dream that they would betray your trust and abandon your flesh and blood for their own interests? Are you regretting your choice now in the afterlife?" Lan Luofeng could not suppress the contempt she felt any longer. She said, "So this is the government, so this is the military. I finally understand." Perhaps sensing the deep mockery behind Lan Luofeng's words, the smiles on the two representatives' faces froze. "If that's how it is, I, Lan Luofeng, would like a promise from the government and the military. Regardless of whether my child Linglan inherits his father Ling Zhao's military privileges, he shall be emancipated from the Ling family, and shall no longer be connected to the Ling family in any way." The two representatives looked at each other, but it was the military representative who spoke up in the end. "What do you mean?" Lan Luofeng smiled chillingly. "If Linglan inherits, all the other Ling family members must immediately leave Doha and go back to where they came from. If Linglan does not inherit, Linglan and I shall leave Doha instead. No matter what the outcome, the both of us shall no longer be part of the Ling family." For a long while, Lan Luofeng had already intended to settle things with the Ling family. If she could clear this forever with one stroke, her efforts in securing this situation would be well worth it. Ling Suren's face twisted in anger. "Lan Luofeng, have you gone mad?" "Why, Uncle Ren, are you afraid?" "Afraid that the child you chose will not be able to beat Ling Lan?" Lan Luofeng was all smiles as she faced Ling Suren, one of her hands lightly covering Ling Lan's tiny chubby fingers. This was probably what a mother's strength referred to. Lan Luofeng had never felt as steady as she was now. Ling Suren was speechless. Although he had been full of confidence just a while back, Lan Luofeng's aggressive manner had shaken him, and doubt started to creep into his mind. He was afraid to take the risk. As if sensing Ling Suren's hesitation, another Ling family elder who was standing beside him whispered, "Beware a bluff." Hearing this, Ling Suren centered himself. That's right. Lan Luofeng must be bluffing out of desperation. If Ling Lan's body stats and potential were really that impressive, why would Lan Luofeng seal away the records? After all, the higher Ling Lan's potential, the more secure his inheritance. A smart person would never seal away those records, but would instead shout it from the rooftops to drive away other challengers. Chapter 8: Comparison of Assessments. The more Ling Suren thought about it, the surer he was of his suspicions. Gaining confidence, he sneered, saying, "Since Mrs. Ling Zhao has so decided, we, the Ling family, shall not force you both to stay. The whereabouts and future actions of Ling Lan shall be none of our business. If Ling Lan inherits, the Ling family will have to move out of Doha within a month's time. Uncle Ren, I hope you will not blame me for my ruthlessness when that happens." Lan Luofeng raised a brow as her eyes flicked towards the two representatives, reminding Ling Suren that both the government and the military would be witness to this agreement. There would be no way for the Ling family to renege on their word. Facing such an aggressive Lan Luofeng, Ling Suren exploded in anger. "And if Ling Lan doesn't inherit, can I also request that you both leave Doha within a month?" Lan Luofeng smiled icily. "I wouldn't ask this if I wasn't willing to do it myself." "Could it be that the Ling family is too afraid to take this risk?" "Are you even more cowardly than a woman like me?" "Of course, if you are willing to give up on the inheritance, I can be merciful and let you all continue to remain in Doha." Lan Luofeng's offer served two purposes. One, by taking a step back, she could force Ling Suren to state his decision clearly, so the Ling family would have no way to feign ignorance later. Two, she also wanted to give the Ling family one last chance. If they could control their greed, they would still be able to remain in Doha for another 20-odd years, which Lan Luofeng believed would be more than enough time for them to cultivate an outstanding operator of their own and secure their position in Doha. However, Lan Luofeng's words only served to cement Ling Suren's suspicions that this was just a desperate gambit on her part. Thus, without any reservations, he sneered coldly in response, "Since you are so stubborn, all right, the Ling family agrees to your terms. As you said, if Ling Lan inherits, the Ling family shall leave Doha. If the child we chose inherits, then Ling Lan will have to leave Doha. He shall never be able to enter Doha within his lifetime, and shall not be allowed to enter any military system of the nation." These stipulations would utterly destroy any chance of Ling Lan gaining rank, and would prevent an adult Ling Lan from ever returning in the name of vengeance. Hearing this, Lan Luofeng felt hatred grow within her heart. It had been foolish of her to feel sorry for them, to try and give them a way out. What the Ling family suggested was utterly ruthless. If Ling Lan had truly been a boy, The Ling family's requests would have ruined his future, forcing him to toil away his life in the working class. The little mercy she had felt for them was now completely snuffed out, and her eyes were cold as she said, "Very well, as you wish." Lan Luofeng called for a servant to prepare an assessment device, but was stopped by Ling Suren. He turned to the military representative. The military must have brought an assessment device over for this visit. "If you please." Lan Luofeng let him do as he liked. She had no intention of tampering with the device to begin with, and even if she had, she would not be so foolish as to do it in front of the military representative. The military representative did not refuse Ling Suren's request. This fit in nicely with their goals after all. In terms of getting accurate data, the military's assessment devices were naturally much more reliable than the ones available for public use. In short order, a top-of-the-line assessment device had been brought in by military troops. Meanwhile, in her mother's arms, Ling Lan was frantically going over the situation with little Four. "Will they be able to determine my gender, or discover your existence?" asked Ling Lan anxiously. If either of those secrets were discovered, she would have to leave this place with her mother, and although she did not know what the outside world was like, the impression she got from Ling Suren and Lan Luofeng's conversation was that life outside could not compare to life here. Moreover, although Ling Lan was not afraid of suffering, she felt that she should naturally inherit her father's premium military benefits as her father's child. Why should a wild child who sprang out of nowhere get to inherit what belonged to her by right? That's right, Ling Lan was still thinking based on the logic she had developed on Earth 10,000 years ago. Inheritance by blood was clear-cut back then, so she really could not understand this current situation. As such, she refused to give up. She would definitely be the one to inherit Ling Zhao's premium military benefits. Little Four's tone was full of disdain, as if a device which has yet to develop artificial intelligence would be able to thwart me. "Don't worry, even if it could assess gender, I can change the data to reflect that you are male." Ling Lan was struck by Little Four's cocky tone. "Little Four, do you have the ability to change the assessment results as you like?" Little Four became exceedingly smug. "Of course, when you were first assessed, if I hadn't covered for you, your spiritual power would have exploded that assessment device." Exploded? Why did that word sound so ominous to Ling Lan? Before Ling Lan could ponder on it any further, she heard the military representative ask, "Who's first?" Lan Luofeng tightened her arms around Ling Lan, face expressionless as she said, "Let the Ling family's child be tested first." Ling Suren assumed that Lan Luofeng was just intending to delay the inevitable, and did not want to waste words arguing with her. He nodded and motioned for the woman by his side to place the child in her arms into the assessment device. Soon, the child's results were presented. Physical fitness, S, rank. Spiritual power, Tier 1, potential, A+. Rank. Assessment overview, excellent. Heavy cultivation recommended. Seeing these results, the military representative's entire bearing changed. This child was definitely worthy of heavy cultivation by the military. A child with A+ rank potential had a certain chance of becoming an Inmecha operator, albeit a small one, but having any degree of probability was better than none. Ling Suren was very satisfied with the military representative's reaction. As he had expected, this child was an undeniable lure for the military. However, he showed none of this satisfaction on his face but turned calmly to face Lan Luofeng and said, "Mrs. Ling Zhao, there is still time. If you take back your words now and surrender the inheritance, the Ling family shall raise Ling Lan with the utmost care." Pretending to be a good Samaritan after going to all this trouble to rob a child of his inheritance? In his dreams, Lan Luofeng said mockingly, "That won't be necessary. I just hope all of you will move speedily when leaving Doha." So saying, she walked over to the assessment device and carefully placed Ling Lan inside it. By this time, Ling Lan and Little Four had came to an agreement to maintain the original assessment results. At first, Little Four had still been a little worried that the other child's results might be better than Ling Lan's, and had struggled over how he could secretly increase Ling Lan's stats, but after seeing these results, Little Four was reassured. Just like that, Ling Lan's sealed results were revealed. Physical fitness, S. Rank. Spiritual power, Tier 2. Potential, S. Rank. Assessment overview, excellent. All-out cultivation recommended. In the end, Little 4 had still not been able to resist tweaking the results a little. The original recommendation of focused cultivation was upgraded to all-out cultivation. Little 4 was extremely pleased with himself. Take that. All-out was way better than heavy. In reality, even if Little 4 had not changed anything, the results would still be the same. The moment these results were presented, the representatives from both the military and the government decided unanimously that Ling Zhao's premium military benefits would be inherited by Ling Lan. The decisiveness of the two representatives was primarily due to the assessment of Ling Lan's potential, although the other stats were also important. Those stats could be improved later on, while potential was innate and had a direct correlation with a child's room for growth. Although the gap between an A+ rank and an S rank seemed negligible, in the long run, the difference would reveal itself to be extremely significant. An S rank had a 5 to 10% higher chance of becoming an in-mecha operator. Based on this point alone, Ling Lan truly deserved all-out cultivation from the military. Lan Luofeng finally let out a sigh of relief. Although she had confidence in Ling Lan, she still couldn't help but feel a little unsettled before the results were confirmed. By this time, Ling Suren could not help but know that he had fallen into Lan Luofeng's trap. His face flushed with anger, and he sorely wished that he could slice Lan Luofeng up into little pieces. On the other hand, Lan Luofeng faced him fearlessly. The Ling family would never have the guts to make a move with the two official representatives here. Lan Luofeng said shortly, Ling Suren, you know the way out. Since she had already decided to cut all ties with the Ling family, there was no point in forcing herself to make nice with them anymore. HMPH, let us go. Seeing the disdain on most of the visitors' faces, Ling Suren knew that they had overstayed their welcome. There was no reason to linger, so he took his men and left. Chapter 9, Gene-Stimulating Agent. Another 5 months went by, and like any other infant, the 6-month-old Ling Lan could finally flip over and had started her evolution into a crawling creature. Ling Lan felt that her tongue was still uncooperative though, only allowing her to utter lone syllables. Even so, her mother Lan Luofeng was overjoyed. Compared to other children, Ling Lan was already very articulate, and Lan Luofeng felt as if she could almost understand what Ling Lan wanted to say. Ling Lan was almost moved to tears. She could finally make it known to her mother when she needed to go to the restroom. During this time frame, despite her best efforts, she had had trouble communicating with her mother who was on a different wavelength, resulting in several unfortunate accidents, causing her no end of embarrassment for having wet the bed again after 27 years of life. Well, alright, let's just put aside all those shameful matters that happened in the past 6 months. There were too many to mention, and Ling Lan did not want to think about them anymore. She had decided that she would wipe this period of life from her memories. This day, the moment she woke up, Ling Lan felt something different in the air. Chamberlain Lincoln's expression was tight, and her mom had dressed her with special care, helping her put on special underpants that would hide her secret from any angle. Ling Lan felt that the underpants were really quite comfortable. Well, if she could ignore the two soft spherical pseudo-testicles inside. Not long after, several strangers in British military uniforms suddenly descended upon the Ling household. Ling Lan observed the men in shock. She did not know if all soldiers who returned from war had the same imposing presence, but Ling Lan could keenly sense the honed edges hidden under those uniforms. This was most certainly a troop of combat-savvy, blood-soaked, veteran soldiers. Ling Lan put on a blank face and pretended to play by herself, but she kept her ears wide open. She was extremely thankful that the family she was born into 10,000 years later was still Chinese, and that the language being spoken was still Mandarin. This allowed her to skip having to learn a new language and meant she could gather information from mother's conversation even as a baby. When the troops introduced themselves to her mother, Ling Lan finally understood. They were here to deliver the premium military benefits Ling Lan had inherited. and would continue to do so every 6 months from now on. This was also the day that Ling Lan found out what the premium military benefits actually were. A large part of those benefits were gene-stimulating agents which were used to raise potential and body stats. There were 4 grades of gene-stimulating agents available on the market, from grade 1 to grade 4. Grade 4 agents were the worst, while grade 1 agents were the best. This grading was based on the purity of the gene-stimulating agent. Grade 4 stimulating agents had a purity of 30%, grade 3 had 45%, grade 2 60%, and grade 1 75%. The higher the purity of the stimulating agent, the less harm it did to the body. It would allow the user to absorb most of the agent, and hence receive a higher boost to his potential and body stats. Therefore, the more agent a child's body could absorb, the better his development would be, building up the solid foundations necessary for potential in mega operators. However, these gene-stimulating agents were horrifyingly expensive. Let's put it this way. A commoner's hard-earned life savings may only be enough to afford 1 bottle of the lowest grade gene-stimulating agent. To get an agent just 1 grade higher, the price would have to be multiplied by 10. As you can imagine, grade 1 gene-stimulating agents could only be afforded by those with either great power or great wealth, while the rest of the common people could only look on in envy. Of course, this didn't mean that there was no chance at all for commoners to receive better resources. Every newborn child could be assessed at a public assessment center and receive one of 6 rankings from the assessment. Those assessed as F rank would not receive any aid from the government until their bodies were unable to absorb any more agent. D rank babies could receive 2 bottles of grade 4 gene-stimulating agent per year. C ranks could receive 2 bottles of grade 3 agent per year, and B ranks could receive 2 bottles of grade 2 agent per year. Meanwhile, A rank babies had 2 options. They could accept 2 bottles of grade 1 agent per year and grow up freely, or enter the military and receive organized military training and receive an endless supply of grade 1 agent. However, with the latter choice, the child would have to spend his entire life serving the military. S rank babies would be immediately taken away for specialized training by the military. But the possibility of that happening was extremely low. As mentioned previously, this formidable ranking very rarely appeared among commoner children. In a nutshell, genetics decided everything. Meanwhile, someone like Ling Lan who inherited premium military benefits was entitled to the premium grade gene-stimulating agents kept for central military use. These agents were even purer than the agents available on the market, almost reaching 90% purity. This was the best the military could do at the moment, since research on agents had hit a plateau. True 90% purity was just out of reach, but no one had been able to make the final step. This time around, the military had sent over a whole 10 tubes of premium grade agent. Because these 10 tubes were worth cities, the military had no choice but to send out some of their ace mechas as an escort. Very quickly, Ling Lan had been stripped down to her special underpants. One of the men who seemed like a military doctor took out a long syringe with a sharp needle from a box he was carrying, and then used it to draw out the gene-stimulating agent from one of the tubes. Ling Lan turned a blind eye to all of this. That was all she could do. Which 6-month-old baby knew to be afraid? At this moment, Ling Lan was grateful for her experience with needles. During her past illness, she had been injected so many times every day that she had become numb to the sight of needles, which was why she could face these injections so calmly now. The syringe was rapidly plunged into her arm. The military doctor was very skilled. Ling Lan only felt a slight sting and an itch as the needle went in, very much like a mosquito bite. The military doctor pushed the agent into Ling Lan's arm gradually, his demeanor stern as he observed Ling Lan's reactions. Some babies were incompatible with the agent, and there were also some babies who had been shown to have allergic reactions. In short, the greatest care must be taken when giving a baby their first shot of gene-stimulating agent to avoid any accidents. Before Ling Lan could sense any difference, Little Four had already rushed to the forefront of her mind without any warning. I sense something delicious. It's a taste I know well. No, that's not right. Something's different. Yuck. What is this trash? Why does it have impurities? This affects the taste too much. Little Four was very unhappy. It felt that it had been tricked. Hearing Little Four's voice, Ling Lan hurriedly closed her eyes. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? She would live to regret it if anyone noticed anything strange from her eyes. Ling Lan said huffily, "Why did you come out?" Little Four felt wronged. It had thought that the great thing in its memories had appeared, only to be presented with this knockoff. It said sadly, "I thought something great had appeared, but it's just a knockoff. There are so many impurities inside. If left uncleaned, your body will be harmed." Hearing that it was harmful, Ling Lan asked anxiously, "Little Four, can you clean it for me?" Little Four perked up immediately at her words, and said smugly, "Of course I can. Who do you think I am? I am the smartest King Mecha learning device from the Mandora star system. I can help my contractor do many things, such as expel any harmful substances from the body." Ling Lan chose to ignore Little Four's self-aggrandizement, asking in confusion, "If this thing is harmful to the body, then why do the people here want to inject it into babies? This is actually a great thing which can improve your body stats and potential. It's just that the technology here seems to be unable to achieve 100% purity, which is why there are impurities remaining which will harm the body. However, even so, the benefits still outweigh the costs. The only thing is that this agent cannot be absorbed indefinitely, because once the impurities have accumulated in the body to a certain degree, the body will lose the ability to absorb any more agent," explained Little Four. Ling Lan was relieved. As long as the outcome was good, and there was no danger to her health, she would still be able to accept it. Besides, Little Four had already promised to clear out those impurities. Very quickly, the first tube of agent had been absorbed by Ling Lan, and the military doctor started injecting the second, and then the third. By the time the military doctor picked up the eighth tube, his forehead was beaded with sweat, and his hands, which had remained steady so far, actually trembled a little. Chapter 10. Absorb everything. The military doctor could not be faulted for losing his composure. Even the very rare SS rank babies could only absorb up to 7 tubes of premium grade agent. This time around, the military had brought over 10 tubes merely as a show of respect toward Major General Ling Zhao's inheritor. The military had believed that no matter how outstanding Major General Ling Zhao's inheritor was, 6 tubes would have been more than enough, but Ling Lan just had to be an oddball who showed no signs of absorption satiation even at the 8th tube. The 8th tube of agent was injected into Ling Lan, and the process was as smooth as ever. When a body started to become satiated, it could be felt in the injection process. If the process was unhindered, that meant that the body could still continue to absorb more agent, but if the process seemed impeded, this indicated that the body was nearing satiation. If the agent could no longer be injected, then it meant that the body was already satiated and could no longer absorb any additional agent. Watching as Ling Lan successfully absorbed the 8th tube of agent, the military doctor's calm expression finally changed. With his back towards Lan Luofeng and Ling Qin, he threw a meaningful glance at his assistant beside him, signaling him to go contact their superiors. The military doctor felt that he had done it subtly enough, but his actions had unfortunately still been captured by Ling Lan. Of course, the military doctor didn't think to worry about Ling Lan, for how much could a 6-month-old babe understand? What he didn't know was that an oddball such as Ling Lan existed in the world, an oddball who could think like an adult from birth. Seeing the military doctor's actions, Ling Lan knew that something wasn't right. Afraid that her absorption rate may be a little overboard, Ling Lan hurriedly asked Little Four, "Little Four, something doesn't seem right. It looks like we may be absorbing too much agent. Why don't we stop here?" Having had a taste of the agent, Little Four was unwilling to just stop. He reassured Ling Lan, "Don't worry. Didn't they bring over 10 tubes? Since they brought so many, They must have expected that you would be able to absorb that much. Little Four felt that his logic was impeccable. Ling Lan was still doubtful. Are you sure? What if they just wanted to be prepared? Maybe only demonic babies can absorb that much. We have just started out. It wouldn't hurt to keep a lower profile. Ling Lan assumed correctly. But what she didn't know was that unfortunately, even if they stopped now, it was already too late. Little Four was still unwilling to just give up. This agent was good stuff. It would help get rid of the hidden danger threatening his host. So after some thought, he decided to focus on the present and think about the other things later, and said, I will arrange some cover-up during the 10th tube and make it look like your body is getting satiated, so even if your absorption rate is a little out of the ordinary, it still shouldn't arouse any suspicion. At the most, you'll only get a little more attention as you grow up, and we can pull back the rate gradually in future so that the impact of this first time is lessened. Before Ling Lan could argue, Little Four continued, you should know, absorbing these 10 tubes of agent will not only greatly multiply the efficiency of your training, but will also eliminate your hidden trouble once and for all, so you will never have to worry about your spiritual power overwhelming your physical body ever again. Huh? Didn't you say that my chi exercises would resolve the issue in 2 years anyway? What are you hiding from me? Ling Lan finally sensed that Little Four was not telling her the full story. Little Four froze, realizing that it had slipped up, and finally admitted, what I meant was that if your spiritual power does not increase, your problems would be solved in 2 years, but you must understand, even if you don't train it, your spiritual power will still increase as you grow older. Ling Lan was exasperated. How could you not tell me this? Don't you know how dangerous this is? Little Four looked up towards the heavens and mused with an innocent look on its face. I didn't tell you. It must have slipped my mind. Ling Lan sorely wished that she could grab the little rascal and give him a good spanking. Sadly, she had already promised never to use domestic violence, so she could only put away her twitching palms. Suspiciously, she wondered, had the little rascal foreseen this day, and so had made her promise from the start to avoid violence? She took several deep breaths to calm herself down before asking, tell me honestly, in these 6 months, how much has my spiritual power grown? Even if she were to die, Ling Lan wanted to know how she died, so she wouldn't end up as a befuddled ghost. Actually, it's only grown this much. Little Four indicated with his short and stubby fingers how truly little Ling Lan's spiritual power had grown. Since it's only that much, does that mean there is no danger? Ling Lan asked with a sneer, now holding very little faith in the deceitful little rascal. Little Four wilted and said uneasily, if it weren't for the agents this time, you would have fallen greatly ill in 2 years' time. However, as long as you continued your chi exercises, I estimated that you would have completely recovered after 3 more years of practice. But now that we have this agent, all the hidden problems are solved, so there will no longer be any trouble. Having said that, he grinned cheekily, satisfaction plainly written on its face. It did not seem to be concerned about how badly things could have gone if they hadn't received the agent. Seeing this, Ling Lan gave up in resignation. If she tried to argue seriously with the little rascal, she would just drive herself mad. Still, she gave a stern warning to Little Four, no matter what happened from now on, he must tell her everything. She wanted no more of these half-truths. Little Four was quick to agree, but whether he would really live up to his word Ling Lan couldn't tell. Honestly, Ling Lan felt that something was off with Little Four. Even though he claimed to be her contracted long-term companion, she did not have the authority to access the Learning Spaces study programs on her own. That is, if Little Four did not allow it, she would not be able to open the mental doors that represented those courses in her mindscape. If Ling Lan were someone else, she might have fretted over this, or may even suspect the learning device of having ulterior motives. However, Ling Lan was very tolerant. If she couldn't open it, then she couldn't open it. There was no need to push. It was nice enough to have someone to shoot the breeze with when she was bored. At heart, Ling Lan did not have any ambitions to lord over other people. All she wanted to do was live, safely, freely, and painlessly. In short order, the assistant had returned from giving his report. He nodded lightly at the military doctor, indicating that he should continue with the injections. Having received approval from the superiors, the military doctor continued injecting without worry. He had honestly been taken aback by Ling Lan's insane absorption rate, but had also been troubled over how he could account for the excess injections used to his superiors. Finally, at the 10th tube, the military doctor finally felt more and more resistance as he continued to push the plunger. In the end, he could no longer inject any more agent when there were only a few drops left in the barrel. Only then did the military doctor pull out the needle, secretly dabbing away the sweat on his forehead. Luckily, this child had been satisfied with this 10th shot, letting them complete their mission successfully. A child who could absorb 10 tubes of agent was not unheard of, but it was definitely very uncommon. The military people did not linger, leaving after a brisk farewell, leaving behind a bewildered Lan Luofeng and a slightly knowing Ling Qin. Ling Lan's gaze tracked the soldiers as they left, and she finally relaxed. And then, she registered a heavy weight in her bladder. She was dismayed. She hadn't even had much milk to drink since her mum knew that she would be given agent to absorb, so why did she have the uncontrollable urge to pee? As if sensing Ling Lan's distress, Little Four said sheepishly, "I was afraid the military people would notice, so I didn't dare to expel the impurities through your sweat glands, but instead directed them to your bladder." In other words, with all the impurities gathered there, it would be even more surprising if she didn't need to pee. Ling Lan didn't even have the chance to yell for her mother before she tragically wet the bed once again. "Little Four, you're dead meat," wailed Ling Lan. God damn it, it had taken so long for her to regain some sense of dignity and appeal to others as a lovable and angelic baby. But those joyous days had barely begun before they were ruined by this inconsiderate Little Four. Ling Lan was saddened once again, especially when she heard her mum smack her bum lightly, teasing her for wetting the bed again. She felt the world around her grow dim in despair. Chapter 11, Learning System Activated. That afternoon, on the planet of Doha, in the chief's office in the logistics headquarters of the 1st Military Regiment of the Federation, a young officer was reporting to the Chief of Central Logistics on the urgent news delivered today. "Chief, it has been confirmed that there is nothing wrong with Dr. Mu's report. The reports of the 6 Mechapilot escorts match up with his report perfectly," reported the young officer, flipping through the notes in his hands as he stood respectfully facing his seated superior. Behind the desk flipping through another set of notes sat an energetic middle-aged general. He nodded as he listened, before asking, "How many people know about this?" The young officer paused for a moment, stunned by the unexpected question, but he quickly recovered and answered, "Chief, this matter was handled by me personally. Other than my assistant and I, and those directly involved, no one else in the military is aware of the details." "Very good. Designate the information on Major General Ling Zhao's inheritor as S-Class. Those below the rank of general are not allowed to access it. Also, put out a gag order for those who already know of the matter. As for the follow-up on that inheritor, let the same group of men be in charge of it." "Yes, Chief." The young officer saluted and left the office with his orders. Alone in the now empty office, the middle-aged general sighed softly. "Ling Zhao, this is all I can do for your child. Hopefully he doesn't attract the attention of anyone else in the military." Ling Lan was very lucky. Completely unbeknownst to her, a certain someone had taken special care to protect her so that she would not be controlled by the military and be forced to become a fighting machine. What this gave her was time, precious time to grow up and enjoy her childhood. However, at this moment, Ling Lan had no thought to spare for how the military wanted to treat her. Although she had been worried that her unusual absorption rate would attract the military's attention, after 10 peaceful days of nothing happening, she had put it out of her mind and moved on to do other things. She had always been an optimistic girl, which was why she had managed to survive 24 years of unbearable pain with her sanity intact. Of course, another reason why Ling Lan had put away her concerns about the military so quickly was the fact her attention had been drawn away by some wonderful news. Early this morning, Little Four had announced, with great aplomb, that she was now qualified to access the learning mind space. In Little Four's mind space, A spacious circular hall was Ling Lan's entry point. Surrounding her were a circle of tightly sealed doors. Ling Lan had tried to open some of them, but every single one had been shut tight, and would not budge no matter what she did. After Little Four had had his fun watching her make a fool of herself, he had explained that the doors would not open until she met specific learning requirements. As for the details of those requirements, Little Four refused to say and had given her no hint at all. However, Ling Lan still had a good guess that the requirements had to do with her physical fitness, as Little Four had reminded her more than once to work hard on her training. Knowing that this was not up to chance, Ling Lan suppressed her burgeoning curiosity and settled down to focus on her regular training. This would not only aid her in her quest to eliminate the hidden threat to her health, but it might also provide her with the key to accessing the materials hidden behind the doors of Little Four's learning space. In truth, Ling Lan was only approaching this matter with such urgency because she was completely bored out of her mind. Every day she just lay in bed, eating and sleeping, sleeping and eating. Or else she was playing on her own. These days as a baby were just too boring to endure. Even when she had been bedridden in her past life, she had at least been able to go online and surf the net to relieve her boredom, or perhaps even read some novels or whatnot. Of course, the other reason why Ling Lan was feeling suffocated was that her mom was being extra vigilant in fears that her secret would be exposed. Her mom did not even dare to take her outside, much less take her visiting. As a result, Ling Lan had unfortunately spent the 7 months since she had been born in only 3 places: this bedroom, the grand hall, and the balcony, giving her no chance to truly observe this strange new world. Just when Ling Lan thought that she was going to go crazy from boredom, Little Four showed up with the good news, making her so happy she could cry. And so Ling Lan was on her best behavior today. After being fed by her mother, she did not fuss to be taken outside as usual, but instead quickly went to sleep, which was in fact entering into the mind space created by Little Four. This time, when Ling Lan entered the mind space, she noticed that the space had changed a little since she had last been there. This little change was a great source of joy to Ling Lan. Among the many tightly sealed doors, one door was shining with an eye-catching red light. On the surface of the door, 2 large Chinese words could be seen: physical skills. By her side, Little Four explained, "I have updated the language system so that it now uses your current writing system and verbal language, so you won't have any trouble understanding it." Ling Lan was so touched by this that she pulled Little Four over and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek in gratitude. Little Four blushed, turning completely red, and starting to mumble bashfully, "Don't think you can win me over by being nice. I, Little Four, am an upstanding being. I will never go against my principles no matter what." "Oh, Little Four, as you're saying this, can you not wriggle your butt around? And while we're at it, the corners of your lips are corked a little too high, aren't they?" His words had no credibility whatsoever. Ling Lan did not notice Little Four's mumbling. All her attention had been taken up by the door before her. She slowly walked up to the door and gave it a good shove, and the door swung open. Ling Lan did not hesitate. She walked right in, and the open door slammed shut behind her. Suddenly, the room went dark. Ling Lan was shocked by this sudden turn of events, and shouted out, "Little Four, where are you?" Little Four's voice did not ring out through the darkness. All was silent around her, and the room was as dark as before. The eerie combination of darkness and silence caused Ling Lan's heart to pound violently, but she fought the instinctual terror and stood still, deciding to wait it out. She had faith that Little Four would never harm her. Ling Lan did not know how long she waited, for in the dark silence, time stretched endlessly, making the wait feel much longer than it really was. After a while, the cloistered darkness made Ling Lan recall her time as a fetus, and her rapid heartbeat started slowing gradually until it returned to normal. She shut her eyes and tried to remember how it felt to be within her mother's body, and was suffused with a tranquil calmness. Her fear and anxiety faded, and she entered a semi-conscious semi-dreamlike state. After an indeterminate amount of time, Ling Lan abruptly sensed that the dark world around her had become awash with light. She squinted at the sudden brightness, and slowly surfaced from the depths of her intercom. As her eyesight adjusted to the light, Ling Lan found that she was standing in an open square. The area was as large as a football field, no, even larger. Ling Lan felt very small in this wide expanse of space. Right then, a slightly mechanical voice spoke tonelessly from behind her. Psychological Resilience, SSS, rank, highest level of physical skill training authorized. Apparently, the beginning was just another test. The system had been evaluating her psychological resilience based on her reaction. If she had reacted too badly, the system would have kicked her out and made her try again another time. On the other hand, if she did well enough to pass, the system would assign a ranking based on her score, which would be used to determine what level of training she'd be subjected to. Of course, even if Ling Lan's performance was terrible, the system would still have allowed her to start learning the most basic level of physical skill training eventually, but her training would have been inevitably delayed. It should be noted that the earlier a contractor can learn the skills available in the mind space, the better, which is why the Mandora star system chose to have newborn babes bound to these learning devices. Still, what the child can accomplish in the end is also dependent on his innate qualities. A heaven-blessed genius would be able to achieve the much more by completing the courses provided by the learning system, becoming more and more outstanding, while a mediocre talent may just while away in mediocrity. If the learning system is activated too late, the difference in levels would be impossible to bridge. Undeniably, Ling Lan had the great advantage of having 2 lives' worth of experience, netting her the highest psychological resilience ranking of SSS from the system at first try. But we should also remember to shed a tear for Ling Lan. True to its name, the highest level of physical skill training was not an easy course to master. It looked like Ling Lan would soon be living a miserable life of being tormented by the system. Ling Lan spun her head around to look for the source of the sudden voice and saw a uniformed male soldier standing there, eyes cold as he observed her. Don't ask Ling Lan how she knew the man was a soldier, it was a gut feeling. Ling Lan felt as if he were an unsheathed sword, sharp and precise, and she found it difficult to breathe just from being under the pressure of his gaze. Chapter 12. Tests could be anywhere. Ling Lan gulped silently and tried to remain calm as she asked, "Will you be teaching me physical skills?" Ling Lan was extremely interested in learning these skills. In her previous life she had been mostly confined to a bed, but now that she had a healthy body, she wanted to learn as much as could so that this great body of hers was not wasted. The man remained expressionless, replying flatly, "No. I am just here to introduce the skill paths you may choose." Ling Lan exhaled in relief yet couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Although facing the man was extremely stressful, like a mountain pressing upon her making it hard to breathe, this also meant that he was very formidable. If he had been her teacher, she would certainly have benefited greatly. The man paid no mind to Ling Lan's conflicted feelings, but continued by introducing himself. "You may call me Number One." Number One? Was that a code name? Could it be that in this learning space, all the instructors had no names but only went by code names? Was it because names were unnecessary, or was there some other reason? Number One continued, as follows. "I will introduce the options you have under the highest level of physical skills training. There are 3 sets, the offensive series, the balanced series, and the defensive series." Ling Lan listened very attentively as this choice would affect her entire life. She could not afford to be careless. The offensive series, as its name implies, will cover the physical skills necessary in building a foundation for forceful offensive attacks. The balanced series will cover foundational physical skills suitable for a mixture of offense and defense, while the defensive series will focus on defense. Each contractor may only choose one set to practice. Number One seemed satisfied with Ling Lan's serious attitude as he further explained, "These 3 foundation physical skill sets cannot be practiced simultaneously, or else the body will be greatly damaged." Ling Lan was startled. She had indeed been considering the ambitious idea of learning more than one set, and she had not expected Number One to see through her intentions and warn her. Gratefully, she said, "Thank you. Instructor number 1. Although number 1 had said that he would not be her instructor, Ling Lan sincerely felt that number 1 was strong enough to be anyone's instructor, and thus deserved the title. Number 1 seemed a little taken aback by Ling Lan's manner of address, but quickly brushed it off. In his usual flat tone, he asked, "Which set will you pick?" Ling Lan considered the 3 sets. Honestly, Ling Lan was drawn towards the balanced series, since it covered both offense and defense. This meant that the set had no obvious weaknesses, while the other 2 sets had very distinct advantages and disadvantages. Ling Lan did not plan to become a master practitioner, but only wanted to strengthen her body. Just as she was about to answer, a flash of inspiration caused her to say instead, "Instructor number 1, I would like to hear your recommendation. Which set would work best for me?" Number 1's gaze turned sharp, his focused gaze was like a dagger flying straight at her, but Ling Lan's face still held a neutral smile, as if she felt none of number 1's rage. The 2 of them stared at each other. The pressure coming from number 1 grew heavier and heavier. Though Ling Lan still looked calm on the surface, she was already quaking in her bones. She desperately encouraged herself to hang in there, telling herself that she just needed to hold on a little bit longer. Finally, Ling Lan prevailed. Number 1 dialed back his killer gaze, and an almost indiscernible smile flitted across his face. Ling Lan's heart settled. She knew she had made the right choice. As expected, number 1 gave her his recommendation. "I recommend you choose the defensive series." In truth, the presence of number 1 was not so simple as to just introduce the sets to the contractors. He was actually another one of the examiners. From his very first sentence, he had begun misleading the contractors, giving contractors the false impression that they were free to choose any of the 3 physical skill sets he described. Of course, once a contractor had chosen, number 1 would also allow said contractor to practice that set of physical skills. The problem was, had the contractor really chosen the set that was suitable for him? In the first place, the learning devices had been designed to nurture excellence in outstanding talents. Although this lucky shot in the dark method of choosing could still result in several prodigies, it did not fit in with the original intentions of the learning devices. As such, the only valid explanation was that this was all still a test which assessed the observational skills and logical reasoning of the contractors. Anyone with a little smarts would have noticed, did a simple introduction of the physical skill sets really require the presence of such a formidable instructor as number 1? This was obviously illogical. Naturally, Ling Lan wasn't that smart. She had not noticed this little logical flaw, but had in fact been truly fooled. However, she was very clear on one point, and that was that number 1 was very strong. Moreover, she believed that no one knew the pros and cons of the 3 physical skill sets better than number 1. And since there was such an impressive instructor right in front of her, wouldn't it be a waste not to ask him for some advice? Thus, Ling Lan decided to ask number 1 at that crucial moment. In this almost accidental manner, Ling Lan stumbled her way past another test. It had to be said that Ling Lan was really very lucky. Since number 1 had given his recommendation, Ling Lan naturally did not presume to think she could choose any better, and she quickly selected the defensive series of physical skills to learn. Once Ling Lan verbally acknowledged her selection of the defensive series, the scenery in front of Ling Lan's eyes changed. At this point, number 1 had disappeared, and the person in front of her was now a delicate-looking female soldier. The soldier smiled and said, "Hello, for this period of time, I shall be responsible for your training. You may call me number 9. This self-proclaimed number 9 female soldier had a rather slim figure and did not possess the strong aura and thick sense of bloodshed that number 1 did. Her strength was of a more introverted type, the description still as a statue, movement as a wild hare. One described her perfectly. Ling Lan believed that, in a fight, this female warrior would probably be able to defeat a hulking brute with just one move. She called out respectfully, "Instructor number 9, please take care of me." Number 9 did not say anything more but immediately started doing several stretching exercises, indicating for Ling Lan to repeat them after her. Ling Lan found that although these few moves seemed easy, They were actually not. They stretched each part of the human body to its extreme, with the clear purpose of increasing the body's flexibility. These moves had some similarity with the popular yoga from 10,000 years ago, giving Ling Lan a strange sense of déjà vu. This set of moves had a total of 9 stances. After number 9 performed them 3 times, she noticed that Ling Lan had memorized all of them. Without giving Ling Lan any chance for questions, she sent Ling Lan's consciousness back to the main study hall with a flick of her finger. Ling Lan was struck dizzy by the unexpected blow. She wrapped her hands around her head and squatted, staying still as she waited for the dizziness to pass. As it slowly faded, she found that little Four, who had been out here waiting for all this time, had worried himself sick over her. He was spinning in circles around her, trying to see if she was all right. "I'm fine, little Four. Just a little tired. I need to go out and rest a little." Ling Lan squeezed out a smile with some effort to reassure little Four. She felt as if her spiritual and mental energy had been drained, and was so tired that she just really wanted to sleep. She quickly said goodbye to little Four, returned to her physical body, and fell into a deep sleep, for real this time. Dead to the world, Ling Lan did not know that the anxious little Four secretly used his energy to help Ling Lan activate her qi circulation. He did so over and over again until her qi started circulating on its own. Only then did little Four stop and keep away his energy. After doing this, little Four's image in the learning space became much dimmer. Chapter 13, Car or Plane. Recently, Lan Luofeng had been mired in a conflicted sense of joy. These days, her baby was no longer visiting the Sandman every time she wasn't eating. However, before she could be happy about that for long, her conflict began. Her baby had somehow become fascinated with a strange curled position. Now, there was nothing wrong with the curled position. But whenever she saw her baby's 2 little feet used as bolsters hugged between her little hands against her little head, Lan Luofeng couldn't help but twitch internally and feel a phantom pain in her bones. This position was definitely not something her old bones could achieve. If it wasn't for the fact that Ling Lan was smiling like an idiot the whole time, so she knew that the position was not difficult at all for babies, she really would have rescued those little feet from those plump little hands. Luckily Ling Lan did not know what Lan Luofeng was thinking about, or else she would have burst out in tears. This position was not as easy as her mum thought it was. Even for a baby's body, getting into this position was not an easy feat. Sadder still, this was just the easiest first stance. The following 8 stances were even more difficult, with each consecutive stance being harder than the stance before it. Right now, Ling Lan really had no idea whether she could really complete learning the 9 stances within a year. She recalled instructor number 9's warning. If she could not master the 9 stances in a year, there would be punishment. Of course, to balance it out, if she finished learning the stances within the time limit, there would be a reward. The earlier she finished before the deadline, the better the reward. In the mind space, Ling Lan had felt that doing the 9 stances was pretty easy, and so had been surprised when instructor number 9 had given her a 1-year deadline. She had arrogantly believed then that she would be able to accomplish the task within a month. Now, she finally realized that she had underestimated the courses of the learning space. They were truly insane. Actually, the difficulty was not in getting into the position itself, but rather in achieving perfect accuracy. Each and every muscular curvature and angle must be pinpoint precise. These few days, Ling Lan had been practicing the first stance over and over again, but she still hadn't been able to achieve the most accurate position in one move. Rather, she had to slowly tweak her position to get it right. This did not fulfill her instructor's expectations, which was to get into the most accurate position within 1 second. However, Ling Lan was not anxious. She continued her routine of practicing the curled position with her physical body when awake, and practicing with her spiritual self in the mind space when asleep. Although practicing in the mind space had no direct impact on her body, it allowed her to hone her intuition. In other words, it gave her the ability to assess whether she had achieved the ideal position within a split second. Where there's a will, there's a way. After over 2 months, just as she was about to turn 9 months old, She managed to achieve the state where her body would react the second her will moved. Within the blink of an eye, she could get into the ideal position. This officially marked Ling Lan's mastery of the first stance. Just as Ling Lan was about to happily begin practicing the second stance, some wonderful news brought a halt to Ling Lan's practice. Her mother had finally decided to be charitable and take her out for a day of shopping. In reality, rich and noble families with deep foundations like the Ling family would usually have a chamberlain to handle everything within the household. As the mistress, Lan Luofeng had no need whatsoever to go out to purchase anything personally. However, Lan Luofeng felt that since Ling Lan had already started to recognize people and notice objects, it was necessary for her to go out so she could explore more of her surroundings. Although Chamberlain Lincoln felt that the outing was still a little too premature, he would never go against Lan Luofeng's decisions, and so had quickly made the appropriate arrangements. As a result, Ling Lan stepped out of the house for the first time to see what the world 10,000 years later was like. Over the grand hall and out the door, Ling Lan was immediately greeted by a refreshing scent. A large expanse of grass appeared before her eyes. That's right, outside the front door wasn't a marble staircase as Ling Lan half expected, or even a wide and solid cement road. Instead, there was a whole field of verdant grass stretching out into the distance. Ling Lan actually couldn't see the end of it, which just went to show how large the field really was. How large really was her family home. Ling Lan didn't even have time to get over her awe before a car flew in from a distance. That's right, flew. This thing was like a car yet unlike a car. Its design was very much like the roadsters of Ling Lan's time. There was no one inside the vehicle, and the two seats were such that one was in front of the other. There was no steering wheel, and there were no such things as wheels below it, just a flat surface. Could this be an unmanned car or plane? Please forgive Ling Lan for her uncertain phrasing. She was unsure what to call the vehicle, although she was instinctively leaning towards it being a car. That thing was hovering in the air, about 3 meters off the ground, but as it got closer to Ling Lan's group, the vehicle descended lower and lower. By the time it stopped in front of Ling Lan, its height had dropped to just 50 centimeters above the ground, a convenient height for embarking and disembarking. The car doors opened automatically, greatly surprising an unprepared Ling Lan. Lan Luofeng and Lincoln's attention was currently not on Ling Lan, however, so they did not notice Ling Lan's strange change of expression. "Mistress, please get into the car," said Lincoln respectfully. Into the car? Bingo. 10000 years later, the common transportation vehicle was still the car, so Ling Lan did not have to worry that she would say something wrong by accident in the future. Holding Ling Lan in her arms, Lan Luofeng moved directly to the back seat, while Lincoln sat in the front seat. Lincoln ordered, "Ling 071. Enter fully sealed mode." A synthesized voice rang out immediately in response, "Order acknowledged by Ling 07. Following this, the 4 doors swung shut and a transparent cover appeared to close over the previously open top section, turning the vehicle into a fully sealed car. At this very moment, within the mind space, a napping little 4 was jolted awake. It felt like a brother was close by. The synthesized voice soon rang out again, "Please select your destination." This time Lincoln did not answer, but turned back to look inquiringly at Lan Luofeng. After some thought, for safety reasons, Lan Luofeng decided to go to a classic commercial building which only catered to qualified members. After receiving the destination, the transport vehicle Ling 07 was soon off. Perhaps it was due to the fact that the car was hovering, but there was almost no sense of movement. If it weren't for the fact that the scenery outside was speeding by, Ling Lan would have thought that she was only enclosed in a small room. The car gradually arrived at the busy city center, giving Ling Lan the first glimpse of traffic. Ling Lan saw many other similar cars driving around theirs. At first, she had thought that all the cars drove at the same height, but in reality, this was not the case. On the same vertical axis, Ling Lan saw 4 different cars flying in the same direction at different heights, moving together at the same pace. Ling Lan was awed yet puzzled by this. She wondered how these cars calibrated their heights, Were they not afraid of accidents happening? Her doubt was quickly cleared up, however, when Ling-07 said, "Hover car on a collision course detected. Current distance 3 kilometers. Adjustment signal sent." It looked like the hover cars operated under a central program and also had to possess a certain level of intelligence, enough for them to discover problems preemptively, and to take preventive action to avoid collisions. As expected, Ling-07's next words showed that the two cars had arrived at an agreement. Descending 1 meter. Time for descent will be in 3 seconds. Please watch out. In 3 seconds, their hover car really descended 1 meter, while the approaching hover car ascended by over a meter. Just like that, the two cars brushed by each other, and the distance between the two cars when they had shifted tracks. Well, Ling Lan's little heart had skipped a beat. That was too goddamn close. Had there even been 10 centimeters between the two cars? However, looking at the calm and unconcerned faces of her mother and Chamberlain Ling Qin, Ling Lan knew that this distance must be pretty normal here. It looked like she still had some adapting to do. Chapter 14. Fear of heights is a big problem. When the hover car entered a sprawling city, Ling Lan could see towering skyscrapers and other tall buildings all around her, making her feel like she was truly in a future world. Almost every level of every building had parking spaces, and Ling Lan saw numerous hover cars hanging by the various levels of the tall buildings as they traveled. The sight made her think of Christmas trees, decorated with baubles, uniquely interesting. It couldn't be helped since those hover cars came in all colors of the rainbow, vibrant and eye-catching. Very quickly, Ling Lan had arrived at her destination. Ling-07 paused for a moment in midair as it requested landing approval from their target building. The response came quickly, telling them to park at area B number 77-9. The hover car started circling the building until it arrived at a particular section. Then, it started rising, up and up for an unknown number of levels, before finally touching down on an empty landing spot. After Ling-07 had finished parking properly, the car doors once again swung open on their own. As Lan Luofeng stepped out of the car, bending over slightly in the process, Ling Lan got a glimpse of the floor beneath her mother's feet. And then, tragedy. The floor was entirely transparent, one could see everything below it. And just like that, Ling Lan grew dizzy and lightheaded. Damn it, so she was afraid of heights. Since she had been bedridden from a young age, for most of her life, she had never known she had this fatal weakness. Ling Lan could almost cry. She was starting to think that coming to the future was a terrible thing. On the way here from home, she had noticed that almost all the buildings in this world basically consisted of 100 levels or more. Furthermore, the main mode of transportation here seemed to be the hover car, which could freely travel up to several hundred meters into the air. All this just proved that she would never be able to escape from heights in this life. Ling Lan was tormented. How was she supposed to live? Ignorant of Ling Lan's plight, Lan Luofeng brought her into the building and walked into a transparent viewing elevator. As for what happened next, not surprisingly, Ling Lan fainted dramatically. Fell asleep. Well, at least that's what her mum Lan Luofeng believed, totally missing the tears clinging to Ling Lan's eyelashes. Now, even if she did notice them, she would have just thought that those tears were the result of her baby's sleepiness. Look, don't they just make her eyes sparkle in such an adorable way? Ling Lan did not know how long she had fainted. Slept. Before she was woken up by a screeching sound. Opening her still somewhat blurry eyes, she saw a rampaging female dragon spitting out indiscriminate fire. Lan Luofeng, you think you still have the right to show up here? The yelling woman was still quite pretty, but that affected peacock-like attitude was rather unbecoming, making her lose all sense of class. Ling Lan categorized her as an unsavory character with one glance. She had no tolerance for anyone who scorned her mother. Still, Ling Lan was a little curious. Till now, she had not seen a single ugly person. Everyone had at least looked decent. Ling Lan guessed that this future world was probably technologically advanced enough. Enough that a person's features could be calibrated while within the womb? Ling Lan, What do you think fetuses are? Programs or machines? Calibrated indeed. Ling Lan only found out later that, quite simply, although it did have something to do with technology as Ling Lan had guessed, the changes weren't made before birth, but after. Anyone whose appearance did not fit within certain beauty parameters could choose to use beauty correction agents to fix their appearance. Although that sounded impressive, it was basically the same principle as cosmetic surgery, just more technologically advanced, so everything could be handled via injections without the need to go under a knife. Of course, this did not preclude the existence of extremists, who for the sake of greater beauty beyond regular parameters, would push aside the agents and opt directly for the knife. Lan Luofeng said nothing in reply to the seething woman, but merely cast a cold glance at her, before ignoring her completely to head towards an empty VIP room with her daughter in her arms. Lan Luofeng's clear dismissal made the woman even angrier. She grabbed hold of Lan Luofeng by the shoulder, and was just about to speak when Lan Luofeng hissed at her, "Let go!" Before the woman could do so, Chamberlain Lincoln had rushed over from a few steps away to administer a light flick of his finger. With a shout of pain, the woman was pushed back a step and naturally lost her grip. Interest flashed in Ling Lan's eyes. She hadn't expected that the outwardly gentle and understated Chamberlain Lincoln was such a skilled fighter. That almost imperceptible small movement had been caught by Ling Lan's bright eyes. "Mistress, please go ahead into the VIP room with the young master. There are too many riffraff here. They shouldn't disturb you." Without any expression on his face, Lincoln stepped in between that woman and Lan Luofeng. If he hadn't been a bit too far away from Lan Luofeng back then, this woman wouldn't have had a chance to lay a hand on his mistress. Lincoln was annoyed at himself. It was all because of his negligence that the woman had managed to get close to the mistress and the young master. If she had had any evil intentions. At the thought, Lincoln felt a cold sweat break out along his back in belated fear. In truth, Lincoln was being too hard on himself. If someone had truly had intentions to harm Lan Luofeng and Ling Lan, an expert of his caliber would definitely have sensed it and taken the appropriate defensive measures. He had only been taken by surprise because he hadn't sensed any killing intent from the surrounding people. Furthermore, this VIP section was specially set aside for women, so the surrounding people were all either noblewomen or women from rich and powerful families, leading Lincoln to subconsciously slow his steps. "All right, Uncle Ken." Lan Luofeng had no interest in arguing with the woman and making a public spectacle. Ever since Ling Zhao had died and she had broken ties with the Ling family, Lan Luofeng had known that she would be ostracized by some of the noblewoman circles. Over the years, though the Ling family hadn't conducted much proper business, they had been rather proactive in arranging marriage alliances with the various elite and noble families. While they did not manage to connect with the main descendants of those families, they still managed to build some significant contacts among the lesser branches of those families. That woman who had grabbed Lan Luofeng was one of those Ling family marriage prospects. Her family had agreed to the marriage alliance because they had been interested in the power accumulated by Ling Suzong and Ling Zhao in the army, and were hoping that the Ling family would be able to help them with that power. However, following Major General Ling Zhao's sudden death, the Ling family had failed in their power struggle with Lan Luofeng and had been forced to leave Doha, leaving her plans in ruins. The main cause of all this was Lan Luofeng's clever trap, which is why her resentment had flared at the sight of Lan Luofeng, causing her to rush up like a mad dog to vent her frustrations. Lan Luofeng was not at all surprised by this turn of events. However, Lan Luofeng didn't care. She had never had any aspirations for power to begin with. If it weren't for the fact that she had wanted to show her baby the world outdoors, she would have just happily stayed home without a thought for the outside world. As such, why would she care if others ostracized her or scorned her? It cannot be denied that Lan Luofeng was a proud woman. While Ling Zhao had been around, she had still been willing to make an effort to mingle with these noblewomen. But now, she had no mood for it. Ling Zhao's death had robbed her of half her soul, while the remaining half had become dedicated to the raising of Ling Lan and the defense of Ling Zhao's hard-earned premium military benefits. Lan Luofeng ignored the whispers that broke out after that scene and walked into one of the unoccupied VIP rooms. At the same time, a waiting VIP service staff entered after her to provide her services. Ling Lan sighed. The damnable class system still existed 10,000 years later despite efforts to remove it. Looked like equality among all human beings really only worked in theory. Chapter 15, Sorry, I lost control. In the VIP room, Ling Lan was having her horizons expanded. She would never have imagined that in this world 10,000 years later, one would no longer have to look for items in a store personally, but could just sit comfortably in a VIP room and select categories of items to look at from an ultra-wide screen in the room. These items would be presented to you in 3D imaging, along with a detailed introduction. If a customer was particularly interested in an item, they could click on it to get even more information. Lan Luofeng perused the items with her full attention. She was basically only looking at items for Ling Lan, and very quickly, item after item had been delivered to the VIP room to await Lan Luofeng's final decision. Infant musical bed. This item is elliptical in shape. There are two freely interchangeable modes: half-sealed transparency mode and fully sealed transparency mode. While the infant is sleeping on the bed, it can automatically select the appropriate music based on the infant's brain waves to encourage sleep. Besides that, this bed comes equipped with its own internet network and can download the latest music in the Federation on its own, saving parents the trouble. Its own internet network, automatic downloading and updating. The idle Ling Lan had just been about to fall asleep when these words poured into her ears, waking her up immediately. It should be known that she had been pestered half to death by Little Four recently. Every day he would whine and plead with her to find a chance for him to go online. In his words, "The one who has control over information shall triumph." Of course, Little Four was just saying it for the sake of saying it. Ling Lan and Little Four had no real enemies on the surface after all. The reason for Little Four's urgency was that he needed to understand more about this world so he could better serve his host, lest he make any serious mistakes out of ignorance. Take the incident of the gene-stimulating agent for example. It was precisely because Little Four had no clue about the absorption rate of infants in this world that the results had been so shocking, almost causing immense trouble for Ling Lan. If a mysterious benefactor hadn't stepped in to seal the information, Ling Lan might have already been snatched away by the military to become a war machine. Of course, the mentally adult Ling Lan would not have been so easily brainwashed and could have chosen to run away and hide. However, that would spell the end of her freedom, unless there came a day when she was strong enough to break free from the shackles of the country. Whenever Little Four and Ling Lan thought back on the incident, they would break out in a cold sweat. Even now they dared not drop their guard. A large part of the reason why Ling Lan took over 2 months to master the first stance was that she hadn't dared to put full effort into her training. She was constantly worried there were spies around, so she didn't want to do anything else out of the ordinary to arouse their suspicion. Today, such great news just happened to fall into her lap. A way for her to access the internet, and in such a subtle manner too. It was an infant bed after all. Who would suspect an infant sleeping on the bed to be secretly accessing the internet? Brother, you must be crazy. Please seek treatment immediately. Everyone would look at you as if you were an idiot, a fool, a madman. And then throw down that line and walk away. Ling Lan was overjoyed. This bed was just made for her. Only she could use this infant bed to its full capacity, and not let its functions collect dust. Ling Lan clambered up decisively and started babbling excitedly while pointing at the infant bed. She was telling her mother that this bed was hers. Lan Luofeng was on the same wavelength as Ling Lan this time. With some surprise, she said, "Does Ling Lan want this bed? Could it be that Ling Lan likes music? Alright, since Ling Lan likes it, Mummy will buy it." Okay, Lan Luofeng was obviously a doting mother. Anything her child wanted, she would get. Fortunately, Ling Lan was a mentally mature person on the inside, or else she would certainly be spoiled rotten under Lan Luofeng's unreserved affection. Ling Lan got what she wanted, so her mood was great. She went to look for Little Four to gloat. "Little Four, Little Four seemed to be in a strange mood, for he didn't respond at all to Ling Lan's calls, but was drawing circles on the ground with a sad look on his face. Ling Lan was exasperated and immediately greeted his head with a fist. "You rascal, what are you doing?" Unexpectedly, Little Four remained sullenly silent. Under normal circumstances, Little Four would have jumped up by now and would be loudly complaining about Ling Lan's domestic abuse. Ling Lan was miffed and at a bit of a loss. She proceeded to pinch and pull at Little Four's face with all her might, hoping that Little Four would return to his senses. This time, there was finally some effect. Listlessly, Little Four smacked her hand away, and asked with a long face, "What's up?" Ling Lan asked concernedly, "Did something happen?" Little Four expelled a heavy breath and said, "I have been played by this world." The words had barely left Little Four's mouth when the furious Ling Lan gave him a solid kick in the ass, sending him flying. "Damn it, are you kidding me?" This kick chased away Little Four's strange mood and replaced it with anger. He threw himself at Ling Lan, grabbing hold of her thigh and yelling, "You promised you wouldn't use violence. You're still hitting me. I want to complain, complain my foot. I still need to ask you why you tricked me, looking like you were gonna die, letting me worry." For some reason, Ling Lan just couldn't control the anger burning within her. She knew very well that Little Four might have just been playing a prank. This was something she would have easily brushed off with a laugh in the past. Why couldn't she do that now? Ling Lan didn't know that this was an explosion caused by the buildup of negative emotions in her heart. Although Ling Lan had consoled herself all this time after the gene-stimulating agent incident that everything was fine, Ling Lan had actually been unable to truly be at ease. She had been frightened that her secret would be exposed to the military, that she would become an experiment and end up torn between life and death. These sorts of negative emotions had been hiding deep in Ling Lan's heart all this time. If she didn't have a chance to release them, they would have had a negative impact on Ling Lan someday in the future. It should be said that Ling Lan was very lucky. Ling Lan's mood had brightened considerably due to this outing, a vast difference from her usual calm and forced tolerance. The torments of her previous illness may have given Ling Lan unbelievably strong tolerance and resilience, but that was also where the problem arose. Tolerance was a double-edged sword. Being overly tolerant was harmful to both body and mind. Of course, just this sudden upswing to happiness would not have been enough to set off Ling Lan. However, Ling Lan had become extremely excited by the internet-equipped infant bed, and when she had sought Little Four out to share this news with him, his hopeless demeanor had pushed Ling Lan from the heights of happiness to the lows of anxiety. This sudden and dramatic shift in strongly opposing emotions caused Ling Lan's perfect tolerance to crack. As a result, the deeply hidden negative emotions exploded, leading to Ling Lan's uncharacteristic kick and subsequent rampage. The two of them wrestled in the mind space until they both ran out of energy and flopped to the ground. Ling Lan lay there, panting heavily. She hadn't expected to fight with a little kid, but her heart now felt amazingly light, as if her soul had been cleansed. Ling Lan chuckled, saying, "Little Four, I'm sorry. I lost control.